Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Tom Congdon, Executive Deputy of the New York State Department of Public Service and Chair of the Indian Point Decommissioning Oversight Board and the Indian Point Closure Task Force. I'd like to call this joint meeting of the DOB and Closure Task Force to order. I'd like to thank the town of Cortland for hosting us, as always, and I'd like to ask Executive Director Tom Kaczmarek to take attendance for the record and say a few words about the meeting logistics. Tom?
Thank you, Tom. As Tom said, my name is Tom Kaczmarek. I serve as the Executive Director of the DOB. Please, as I move through the roll call, just indicate quickly your presence as I call your name. Tom Congdon.
Here.
John Sipo is coming up to the mic. Senator Harcum.
Here.
Assemblywoman Levenberg.
Here.
Rich Becker, who's joining over Zoom.
Here.
Deputy Supervisor Jim Crichton.
Here.
Mayor Knickerbocker.
Present.
Susan Spear.
Here.
Catherine Borgia.
Here.
Rachel Adler.
Here.
Elise Peterson.
Here.
Alex Damiani.
Here.
Dan Bendel.
Here.
Linda Malave.
Here.
Jennifer Waka.
Here.
Mark Pattison. Joe Leary.
Yes, here on Zoom.
Bill Smith.
Here.
David Lockbaum. Richard Webster.
Yep, yep.
All right, thank you. Before I turn it over to Chair Congdon, I want to provide a few...
on Zoom.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Before I turn it back over to Tom Congdon, as he mentioned, I just have some logistics to run through. To our in-person board members and guest presenters, please speak into the mic to ensure your comments are clearly heard and accurately recorded. To our panelists joining by Zoom, please keep your mics muted unless you are speaking. To our Zoom participants, please reserve the chat feature for reporting technical issues to our audiovisual team. Only questions will be captured in the Q&A field. The only questions that are captured in the Q&A field can be saved and reviewed. Finally, all speakers tonight are asked to indicate your name before making statements. This will support tonight's court reporter with accurately recording tonight's meeting. With that, I'd like to turn it back to you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Go to the agenda slide, please. By way of a brief introduction to tonight's meeting for any audience members who are new to our meetings, the Indian Point Decommissioning Oversight Board, or DOB, was formed in May 2021 by the Department of Public Service shortly after Indian Point permanently ceased operations and was transferred to Holtec. The DOB was modeled on legislation introduced by Senator Harcum and then Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff, and as called for in the legislation, the DOB meets at least 3 times per year with more frequent meetings as warranted. As you heard in the roll call, we have membership from key state agencies that may play a role in oversight of state laws or regulations, or that may otherwise provide expertise or resources to assist the host community through the transition from an operating nuclear plant to a decommissioned site. It includes elected officials from the host community as well as labor leaders. It also includes 2 additional non-governmental representatives, one from the environmental community, Richard Webster, who is in contract with Riverkeeper, and an independent technical expert, Dave Lockbaum, who is retired from the Union of Concerned Scientists and does not charge for his services to the DOB or in any other arena in which he works now in retirement. Our goal is to ensure decommissioning is safe, prompt, and thorough, and to have robust community engagement. We believe that providing a venue for community involvement can help ensure we meet the state's public interest goals for decommissioning. We have a very active host community, and the state makes a deliberate effort to not only provide information to members of the public, but to also listen carefully and pull information from the public to identify areas in need of additional focus. I'd like to stress that the Decommissioning Oversight Board and the Closure Task Force are not decision-making bodies. We have representative members who do play administrative and policymaking roles, but the DOB itself, as a body, has no formal jurisdiction over the decommissioning of Indian Point. We are a forum for factual information exchange, which helps provide the community members and affected stakeholders with information about the status of decommissioning and provides transparency around both Holtec operations and state and federal oversight. To that end, our agenda tonight will include updates from state agencies on various work streams affecting the site. We will also hear from Holtec to provide updates on their work since our last DOB meeting. They will also describe in detail the reasons for their recent announcement to delay decommissioning by 8 years, which I know many of us have questions about. Lastly, we will also have time for a public statement hearing. Before I get to the first presentations on the agenda, I'd like to make some housekeeping notes for the Indian Point Closure Task Force, which was established by statute. Since our last meeting, the task force issued its annual report as required by law. We did receive some public comments on the report after it was issued, and we have posted those comments on our website. We will take that feedback into account for the next annual report. I'd also like to inform the board that last month I was a guest panelist at a meeting of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, where I spoke about the role of states in decommissioning and highlighted the importance of public engagement and information exchange. I used the opportunity to thank the NRC for participating in several of our meetings during this year and suggested ways in which they can further improve their important role in decommissioning oversight and community engagement. I was disappointed they couldn't be with us today, but I am sure we will have them at future meetings of the DOB in 2024. This time, I'd like to move to our agency updates. Go to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to John Sipos, counsel to the DOB.
Good evening. Thank you, Tom. Just want to make sure folks can hear me okay. Seeing no one who's objecting, I'll start running through the state agency oversight portion of this presentation. As we have in the past, we are posting right now up on the screen the various ways to file tips or concerns regarding aspects of decommissioning at Indian Point. And at this time, we have not received any credible, detailed, specific complaints from our perspective. If we could go to the next slide, please. It would be the monitoring updates, I believe. As we have discussed in the past, there are continuous monitoring devices around the facility, and Indian Point is one of only 5 facilities in the country that have this capability. Like at the September meeting, Holtec mentioned that it would be willing to, through discussions, continue or transfer certain of those monitors along Broadway to the east of the plant for continued operation. And as we have noted in the past, monitors 8, monitors 9 are 1,200 and 1,300 feet from the Navy school. If we could go to the next slide, these are the results. This again depicts the 16 monitors surrounding the plant. These are the Reuters-Stokes monitors. The data here, I believe, is from November 29, 2023. They are all within normal parameters, and as they have been in the past, and as we have discussed at previous meetings. We can go to slide 9. As we have also discussed, the 2021 joint proposal with Holtec that was approved by the New York State Public Service Commission did require minimum trust fund balances and financial project reporting to the state of New York. These are unique safeguards that the state sought and Holtec agreed to, and that have been put in place and provide us with the ability to monitor the financial aspects of what is occurring here. Various state agencies, including the Department of Public Service, the Office of the Attorney General, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and NYSERDA, review trust fund balances with Holtec from time to time. We set out the dates here that those reviews have occurred, and the last one occurred earlier this week on Monday. Holtec has reported at the most recent review that it remains in compliance with its minimum trust fund balance obligations included in the joint proposal and approved by the Public Service Commission. And we note here where the public information regarding the financial status of the trust funds is available. We have a location on our website, the DOE website that is, that provides that information.
John, could I interrupt? Senator Harkin has a question on this slide.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you, John. A couple of years ago, former Assemblymember Sandy Galiff had asked if we could get presentations on a regular basis on the trust funds at the Decommissioning Oversight Board meeting. I realize the information's on the website, but I think it would be helpful. I would suggest at least twice a year for this body to get a presentation on that.
I would concur.
And just in response to that, so every March 31st, Holtec provides a public report as it is required to do so under the Nuclear Regulatory Commission decommissioning regulations. And it has done so. It did so this year. All that information is on the NRC website. We are also providing for
John,
here. And
Can you make sure you're speaking right into
Sorry.
the mic? Thank you.
Let me get my microphone over
John,
here.
I would say, though, yes, the information is on the website. That's different than a presentation in public to this board. That was something that Sandy Galiff asked for and this body agreed to. We haven't done it. So here we are a few years later arguing about whether we're going to do it or not. I'm just saying, can we just do what we agreed to do a couple of years ago?
Pete, I think that's the purpose of this slide. What did you envision that would be different than this slide?
Well, I would
The-
like a
the
real
actual-
PowerPoint
the-
on the trust fund and the balances as opposed to a slide just saying, here's the website, go look at the website.
So the actual numbers from their annual
Yeah.
reports?
Yeah,
Okay. So that, I mean, we can,
we don't have to do it every
Yeah.
meeting, but I think, when Sandy asked for that, it was with the thought that it would be on a semi-regular basis, just so someone could take this body through the numbers.
got it. So for the balances as reported in March of 2023, there are 3 trust funds for each of the units. Unit 1 is 558 million. Unit 2, 619 million. And Unit 3 is 742 million. And so that's the current publicly available balances of each of those trust funds. And they have minimum balances that they have to maintain, which the state agencies are reviewing on a regular basis with them and have confirmed that they're still in compliance with all of those minimum balance requirements.
And what about the expenditures?
And that includes, based on the expenditures they've made since this report, they've maintained the minimum balances. They haven't gone below the minimum balances. They remain in compliance.
No, but can we understand what the expenditures were?
You will get that in their annual public reports. This is their information that is required by the NRC, and it is made public on an annual basis. But we maintain, as state agency partners in the joint proposal, to comply with that, they have to show us those numbers in meetings with government. So that's with all the various agencies, including the Attorney General's office. So that's what we've been doing, and we can report out on that.
Yeah.
It will be up to Holtec whether they report the balances from those meetings. But on an annual basis, they have to put that out publicly, and we will continue to report that information, which is public.
I think to Assemblymember Levenberg's point, and, the balances are good. It'd be at least once, I think, beneficial for this body to understand how those funds work, how the expenditures work, as she referenced. Perhaps after the annual reporting that Holtec makes, they could make a report to this body. But I think as part of the oversight, we need to have an understanding. I get it, the state agencies are doing it, but I think the public would be well served just by having this information through this body.
Yeah, I took what Sandy was saying at the time as providing this kind of report. If Holtec can take back the request for providing additional updates on the fund balances between your annual reports to the NRC, it sounds like the senator and assembly member would like to get that information throughout the year as opposed to annually. Is that fair, Senator?
I think it would just be beneficial to the public, that's all. I'm sure everything's on the up and up, but, you know, for us to understand how that works, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I just, knowing Assemblywoman Galiff a little bit, I cannot believe that she would have been happy with this one line here, that was what she meant when she was suggesting an update of the trust fund balances. I think, you know, again, she's probably looking for a more detailed understanding of what the expenditures were in the trust fund and how it was being used.
Okay.
Can I just ask?
And
I'm-
excuse me,
just
actually, I really want to make sure that this is now addressed. And Senator, I heard you said that we were arguing about it. We are not arguing about it. I am not arguing about it. I just want to make sure, given the comments that were just made, as of December 31st, 2022, Indian Point Unit 1 had $557 million in its trust fund. Indian Point Unit 2 had $618 million in its trust fund, and Indian Point Unit 3 had $741 million in its trust fund. I submit that that is a specific granular report as to the status of the trust funds.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate those numbers, but again, I think we'd just like a little more granularity on the expenditures and how those transactions are made. That's all we're asking.
Well, I could pick up on this because my question is who's responsible for auditing the expenditures?
Richard, can you speak into the mic?
Sorry, who's responsible for auditing the expenditures? Is it the state? Is it the NRC? Or does Holtec have a private auditor that they engage?
So Holtec does conduct internal accounting controls of its trust fund. The NRC, I'm sorry, was someone else trying to speak? I couldn't quite finish my thought there. NRC also provides regulatory oversight of the trust fund amounts. They do this on an annual basis. And the state agencies further, Richard, look at this as well. And this is all set out, Richard, in the joint proposal that you helped negotiate and you signed and Riverkeeper agreed to.
Right.
So if you're suggesting something in addition to the joint proposal or some change to that, I don't know what your comment is actually going to.
No,
but
Mike,
Holtec has accounting obligations, generally accepted accounting principles. The NRC is looking at this as well. They have a suite of accountants, and the state agencies are watching it as well. And this is a process that was set up after probably months of negotiation with your client and others, and that is where we are. And we have provided now the status of the trust fund accounts.
Right, we've got the balances, John. The JP was a while ago, so my memory is not easy, but I guess what I'm trying to understand is, the trust fund is for limited purposes, right? And the trust fund is for limited purposes. But just so the public understands, the trust fund is for limited purposes. It's got limits on what it can invest in, and then there are withdrawals that are allowed, again, for specific purposes, basically for decommissioning and spent fuel management, right?
And site restoration.
And site restoration, okay. And I'm just trying to understand, I'm not sure, when you say the state's looking at the minimum balances, that tends to imply you're not looking at the withdrawals, right? Yes. So I'm just trying to understand, and with a little more detail, I'm trying to refresh my memory here, and also help the public understand, how is this trust fund regulated?
The trust fund is under the auspices of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It is part of their decommissioning regulations. They have regulators and accountants that review the data that Holtec provides. Holtec also, as a company, has to comply with generally accepted accounting principles. And the state is also checking in from time to time, as provided for in the joint proposal. We look at the end-of-year financial reports, and unlike other states, we also negotiated for and we received the ability to get semi-annual updates, and that is what we did earlier this week.
All right, thanks, John.
And, in our future invitations to the NRC, perhaps, what I'm hearing here is that there would be interest in hearing from the NRC further information about how they track the expenditures as well. So I think that could be included in our
That
invitation
would be
for
great.
future NRC presentation.
So turning on to slide 11, again, some updates on DPS oversight activities, including the Unit 3 spent fuel cask registrations associated with the recently completed movement of spent fuel pool to the dry cask storage pad. To Richard's question about additional oversight, there are monthly meetings with various state agencies and others regarding progress in the decommissioning realm, and our state inspector does monitor compliance with the joint proposal commitments. If we could go to slide 11, and this is probably going to be the focus of my presentation, my discussion tonight. As we discussed at the September meeting, we are at a major milestone in the decommissioning. And that, sorry. How's that? All right. Got both Toms helping me through this presentation here, and thank you both. As we mentioned at the September 2023 meeting, we are at a major milestone, and that is the completion of the movement of spent nuclear fuel from the spent fuel pools to the dry cask storage facility. This is a very, very important aspect of what has happened in decommissioning. And if we could just run through slides 11, which is where we were in February of 2023, so roughly 9-10 months ago, there was still a significant amount of fuel represented by the purple section of the pie chart that was in the spent fuel pool for Unit 3. If we skip over to page 12, you'll see the progress. You'll see that the purple segment was decreasing in size. And if we can now go on to page 13, this is sort of like a time-lapse photography of what has occurred at 2023 at the facility. You see on slide 13 that all the spent fuel has been moved from the spent fuel pools into the dry cask storage. And I think as Dave Lockbaum and others have recognized and discussed previously, this fundamentally changes the risk profile at this site. It is a significant event. The source term that was present in the spent fuel pools for Unit 2 and Unit 3 has now declined to 0. That is, 0 source term remains in those spent fuel pools, and the spent fuel has been dispersed into scores of dry cask canisters. So for the host communities, for the metropolitan area, this is a notable milestone. It is a significant safety achievement that we have reached here and that the state has been pushing for probably close to 15 or 16 years. And so I'd like to acknowledge to the community of that we've reached this important step, but also recognize the important work that Holtec's employees and Holtec's managers did to get there. They worked diligently through 2023, on a very focused schedule. This was a schedule that was much, much faster than anything Entergy ever conceived of, ever agreed to, ever negotiated about. And we are in a better place today because of this step. And again, I want to acknowledge Holtec for living up to its commitment that it made in the joint proposal. In fact, if my memory is correct, they not only did they meet the commitment, but they satisfied it by more than a year before than when they were supposed to. So I think we need to acknowledge that. And I know, others may be talking about this as well. I think it can't be oversaid how important this is. The reason that the spent fuel was congregating in the spent fuel pools was when the facilities were first licensed by the federal government said, don't worry communities, don't worry Buchanan, don't worry Cortland, don't worry New York metropolitan area. The spent fuel will be removed from Indian Point. They said this in an early licensing document. The spent fuel will not, the spent nuclear waste will not be stored in your community. But although they licensed the facility and licensed its operation, the federal government never got around to finding a place for the spent nuclear fuel to go. And because of that, it allowed more and more fuel to accumulate in the spent fuel pools. In fact, it was 5 times the amount of the original authorized, the original designed volume. And that created a very high concentration of spent nuclear fuel in these 2 very compact pools. And, there are risks associated with that. And I don't want to detail all the risks. We've done that in filings with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, but no site in the country is like Indian Point in terms of population, in terms of nearby water reservoirs, in terms of seismic questions, and in terms of design basis threats, right? I mean, there are people out there that do not like America and do not like New York State. And this shift from the pools to the casks has eliminated the risk of a severe accident emanating from the spent fuel pools. I think I'll leave it at that on this transfer, but it is a significant achievement. And Tom, yes.
Just one more thought to recognize Bill Smith and UWUA Local 1-2 workers who were responsible for this monumental milestone. We're very grateful to all the members and wish them well. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
So thank you very much. New York is a safer place now than it was before all the fuel was moved. And speaking of that, I'd like to just go on to slide 14 if I could. In terms of New York State advocacy, we have spoken from time to time about how New York State interacts with the federal regulatory authorities in regard to Indian Point and in regard to nuclear energy matters in general. As folks probably recall, there were a series of exemptions that Holtec requested from NRC regulations. And these exemptions have been requested at other facilities throughout the country, and they have been granted with, in fairly rapid order following the requests for the exemptions. Sorry, I thought I heard some feedback there. So New York saw that these exemptions had gone in, and various state agencies reached out to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and really underscored the items that I just mentioned, how unique Indian Point is in terms of surrounding population, et cetera, et cetera. And NYSERDA, Elise Peterson, who is here with us tonight, wrote a very detailed policy paper to the NRC. Tom Congdon and I spoke with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, emphasizing the unique aspect of the population and of the potential hazard, and said, look, Indian Point's different. You should acknowledge it here. Now that we are in decommissioning, you have generally applicable regulations that apply. Maybe you shouldn't be regulating by exemption when it comes to Indian Point. And it ultimately worked out that the exemptions were not granted in 2022, 2021. They are in the process of being gone through now and being finalized and being issued and being granted. But again, it's after the spent nuclear fuel came from the spent fuel pool and went to the dry cask storage. So I think that's also important to acknowledge that New York has been advocating in a creative way here to protect the citizenry. If we could go on to slide 15, this I sort of anticipated what's on slide 15 and the following ones. So given that the transfer has occurred, has been completed, NRC has begun to start issuing the exemptions, and those exemptions are set out on page 16 and page 17 here, and these are similar to what has been granted at other facilities across the country. And again, now that the spent fuel has been transferred to the casks, there is less risk. There is zero radiological risk coming from the spent fuel pool, and that actually paves the way for these exemptions to be granted. If we could just go on to page 18, again, some more information about what Cliff Chapin, our state inspector, has been working on at Indian Point, has been watching the spent fuel transfer, looking at the demolition of a turbine, and the construction of new security facilities that are focused on the dry cask storage area. Corrective action is also being monitored with respect to industrial safety, and there was an incident where there was an oil sheen within the last week, which we may talk about a little bit more. Lastly, there was a pre-enforcement meeting that took place down in Rockville in late October. We previewed this to the Decommissioning Oversight Board at our September meeting. This is the issue where NRC conducted an inspection at the Camden, New Jersey facility and noted that there had been a change from NRC's perspective in the manufacturing sequence, in the manufacturing process for dry cask storage, involving the positioning and the securing of some subcomponents within the dry cask. We have the hyperlink there for the meeting, and to date there has been nothing that's been reported out from NRC regarding that. Holtec made a very lengthy presentation at that meeting. I'm sure NRC is considering it, but that is the current outstanding enforcement issue, I'll say. And again, it was a pre-enforcement conference. There's probably a lot more that will occur regarding that before it reaches any type of final resolution. And I think with that, that concludes what I was planning to say regarding state oversight, and in particular DPS oversight. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel and the Department of Labor. So thank you very much for your attention. We really appreciate being here tonight.
On October 31st, New York State Department of Labor continues to be in contact with Holtec's HR department, and on October 31st, 3 rapid response orientations were held on site. 24 workers participated, 13 workers utilized their one-on-one resume development appointments. Following the events on 10/31, all participants received follow-up material containing a recording of the orientation and listing of resources mentioned. Workers were unable to attend, received a letter advising services where they're available, and given our rapid response contact information. A new WARN notice was submitted on 10/6, indicating the separation of 138 workers that will occur on 12/29. And a WARN postponement for 2 employees was pushed again to 12/29/2023. On Thursday, November 30th, letters were sent out from the North Atlantic State Regional Council of Carpenters, Westinghouse, and Champion Specialty Services providers to their employees, stating that 97 employees will be laid off by the end of 2023. DOL is working on collecting additional information on this, and we will assist all workers impacted by the layoff, and we will share more information as it becomes more available.
I believe Senator Harkam has a question.
Sure.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you for
Hey.
everything you and your team are doing. Quick question. Is DOL working with any of the contractors in the Hudson Valley to directly link folks with jobs that may be opening up on a lot of the development that's happening in White Plains and New Rochelle and areas like that?
Yes, our Westchester office works closely with the contractors on that. We also have our virtual career fair that's happening on Tuesday, December 19th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., as well as Westchester County's next career fair is January 18th, 2024.
All right.
But we work collaboratively with them. It's just that, you know, we work with all the different career fairs and everything like that, and they have specialty career fairs that we have occur throughout the year.
All right, that's great. Thank you.
I have some questions as well.
Go ahead, Assemblywoman.
Can you help me understand, maybe you do know, maybe you don't know, when the employees, these 97 employees were onboarded, and how many of them are safety personnel that they're letting go?
I'm not sure on that. I'd have to
Okay.
collect that
That might be a
information.
question for Holtec.
Okay.
Yeah.
A rundown of the layoffs from the carpenters that were announced last week. This is Westinghouse, Champion, EAS.
Do we know
Contractors.
when were those employees onboarded?
All right. So they've been onboarded, you know, on a regular basis since August of 2021. That's when we hired our first contractor with Champion's predecessor, Williams, and then Westinghouse's predecessor, BHI, or BHI's predecessor, Western. So there is no number, and they're both different categories. The BHI or the Westinghouse employees are rad waste, RP technicians, and all of the RP supervisors are all part of the Carpenters Union. And then we employ carpenters, OEs, ironworkers, and electricians from the local units, the local unions here. As projects ramp up, we staff to the projects. Holtec doesn't hire the individuals. Champion and BHI are responsible to hire the individuals. What we're responsible to do is develop a schedule and provide that information to Champion, vet out the schedule, and determine how many people we need for each craft, from each craft for each project. And then as the projects wind down, prior to the schedule delay, which I'll talk about, we move them on to further projects. The difference here is that we're not moving them on to further projects. As projects are winding down, the projects that are remaining don't require that staff. So there is no date when any of the 79, one of them could have been August 14, 2021 when we hired them, or it could have been 2 months ago when we staffed up for a smaller project.
Just quickly, Frank, a lot of folks don't know who you are
Oh,
at
I'm
this
sorry.
meeting. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Frank Spagnolo. I'm the new site vice president, and in the appoint, Rich Baroni has moved up to the chief nuclear officer. Sorry.
Thanks, Frank. And you're going to be doing a presentation a little bit later on the extended timeline, so I can ask some of these other questions, but I was curious about some of the, I'm sorry, did you say how many of the people from the initial, that 138 had found other positions or not?
From that 138, we wouldn't be able to tell you how many of them have gone to new positions, but we can tell you how many of them participated in the rapid response.
And what is rapid response? What does that actually mean?
Our rapid response team works whenever a warrant notice comes into place, and they work to assist individuals to find new careers, jobs, or other opportunities, such as like training, certification, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I can ask the rest of my questions.
But many of the 138, I think, were within UWUA, so Bill may be able to provide some further color on how long they'll be employed and what you understand from that group of individuals. Are they retiring? Are they moving on to other work?
Yeah, most are retiring, and this was what the fuel to pad. This was the agreement contractual, that's it, they would be done, and they're done on December 29th of this year.
Thanks.
And that was planned and scheduled because
Yes.
their jobs are done, and that was who I was thanking earlier in the presentation. Okay, thank you, Rachel. We'll move on now to presentation by DEC. I believe Dan Bendel's on the line. Oh,
I
I'm
believe-
sorry, was there another question? Tom Carey had a question from Zoom. Tom?
Hey, Tom, thank you. It may be a question for Mr. Spagnolia. You know, when we talk about these layoff numbers, I imagine it had nothing to do with the legislation that passed. You know, I know Holtec was talking about, you know, having massive layoffs, you know, because of this possible legislation. But it seems to me that a lot of these layoffs were going to be, once the fuel was all stored in the dry cask, then that was probably a predicted number. Is that an assumption, or is that true?
No, this is Frank again. That is a true statement. So this coincides with fuel on pad, dry fuel completion. There were probably 300 people associated with dry fuel. Both the UWA and the Teamsters contracts at the last negotiation had this in their contracts, that they understood there would be, the UWA positions would be eliminated completely. We were going from an operating agreement to the National Labor Agreement, which does not include the UWA. And that was all negotiated a couple of years ago, before we even shut down.
That's for the 138 here that we're talking about, right?
Yes, so that 138, 5 years ago was informed what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted a little clarification, because I kind of figured those numbers were going to be pretty close to that. Once the dry cask project, once that portion was completed, then there probably would be a minimum of 100 people getting laid off. But I know Holtec, you know, during earlier talks, when the question arose that because of the possible legislation that was proposed, that there would be massive layoffs. So I haven't seen that, and hopefully that doesn't happen. But thanks for the clarification.
So Tom, I think the other thing that Rachel mentioned is that last week the carpenters were affected by layoffs by contractors to Holtec, that according to the carpenters were layoffs that were related to the change in schedule, which Holtec is going to speak to later, has indicated that it was related to the change in law.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll get into that later on in
Yeah.
their presentation.
Tom,
Thank you.
if it's okay, I'd like
Sure.
to say something, because there was a little confusion. We're talking about two different things. We're talking about union with getting the stuff on the pad, all the fuel on the pad, which has been completed. But there was a very interesting letter, press release that went out, job-killing legislation results in layoffs right before Christmas. So I'd like to read just a little excerpts from there. And this was given by William Banfield, Assistant Executive Secretary Treasurer of the North Atlantic States Regional Council of Carpenters.
Mayor?
Yes.
Before you begin, can you just speak into the mic?
Oh,
Thank you.
absolutely. So this is the 97 jobs that are being lost, so I don't want there to be confusion. Because of the legislation, this is what's happened. As you know, S 6893 and A 7208 prohibiting the discharge of any radiological substances into the Hudson River in connection with the decommissioning of a nuclear power plant was recently enacted into law. The North Atlantic Regional Council of Carpenters, along with our organized labor partners at IPAC, opposed the legislation over concern that it would lead to several unintended consequences that are actually detrimental to the environment, public safety, and economic development, including more precarious on-site water storage at IPAC and schedule changes in the decommissioning that will protract what is already a lengthy and complex process, ultimately meaning extensive layoffs and a long timeline for completion. The legislation is duplicative with federal and state regulations and strict safety standards already in place at IPAC. As all of the stakeholders on the ground at IPAC said many times during its consideration, it will do little more than slow down the safe decommissioning of IPAC significantly. And I just have a little more to say. Decommissioning activities are already governed by strict regulations set forth by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the Environmental Protection Agency, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, both of which gave the necessary approvals to Holtec Decommissioning International. Furthermore, New York's Department of Environmental Conservation issued a state pollutant discharge elimination system permit to HDI, which allowed for DEC oversight of the project before this legislation was enacted. The technical processes and best practices contained in the array of regulations governing nuclear decommissioning results in the radiological water discharge from these plants being nearly indistinguishable from the natural radioactivity present in the environment. And like I said, this is part of the letter with the loss of the 97 jobs from William Banfield, Assistant Executive Secretary Treasurer of the North Atlantic Regional Council of Carpenters. These gentlemen, these carpenters, men and women, will be laid off right before Christmas.
Can I just say on this that I think we can all agree that this layoff is associated, can I just check with you, Mr. Spagnuolo, this layoff, the 97 carpenters, is that associated with the schedule changes that you've announced?
So like I said, there's three different reasons for each of the layoffs.
Right.
They all have their own numbers. However people want to count them, I'm not going to get into that. There was a group of people that were going to get laid off when we finished fuel and pad, and that was completed on October 15th. They had their demo, and layoff is, a lot of them didn't lose, they stopped working at Indian Point, and they went back to whatever project they may have been on. So
Right.
Those are planned.
those were planned. If we finished next year moving fuel, they would have been laid off next year.
Understood.
The UWA and the Teamsters, the house people, security, ops, maintenance, RPs, their contract expired at FOPP. Now, we didn't know exactly when that would happen, so we predicted November 15th. We wanted to give ourselves some time, so November 15th. But we wanted to give some time, so we wanted to push it out to the beginning of December. And we determined, let's push it to December 29th, give us enough margin to make sure that everything is done. There was a lot of work to do besides just the fuel going to the pad in order to go to that protocol, which I'll talk about later. So that's a group of people. And part of that is also HDI. People associated with fuel on pad protected under HDI will also get laid off. That project is done. Not unknown to anyone that was involved in this. The last group of people, when we looked at our schedule, which I'll talk about later, there are, historically, if you hire a contractor to build a building, and it's 500 people building the building, when the building is done, they get laid off. It's the same concept at Indian Point. So each project is staffed. For the past, since I said August 14, 2021, we have just continued to add projects. This project's done, we move on to the next project. with the delay in the schedule, that is going to cause projects not to proceed in 2024 that we wanted to do. And that's what I'll talk about. So there's 3 groups, and that's the reason for it.
Great, thanks for that clarification. I think I'll just say, with regard to the carpenter's letter, that first of all, anybody getting laid off is never a good thing. We all feel for them. Second of all, I don't quite understand how it's associated with the legislation. It seems to be associated with the oil schedule change, but let's get to that debate after your presentation.
Thank you.
Frank, I'm sorry, Tom. I know you use acronyms and, you know, it's just not everybody understands, you know, fuel on pad, FOP, and different things. So just, I know. That's how you guys talk. I know that. Just for everyone else. Thank you.
I'm going to wait until Frank goes through.
Great. So if we could now turn to the DEC. I think Dan Bendel's on Zoom and is going to walk through a few slides from the DEC side. Dan?
Good evening. Can you hear me clearly?
Little echoey. Dan Bendel from the Department of Environmental Conservation.
Good evening, it's Dan Bendel. Just going through some of the administrative consent order requirements that DEC has worked on since the signing of the joint proposal. The Citizens Participation Plan, which is required and involves the interaction between the state agencies and the public. We've approved the CV plan last September 23rd, 2022, I apologize. The scoping work plan, which defines the whole remediation investigation of the facility. The scoping work plan was approved also last August 22. The remedial investigation is a series of investigation work plans designed to identify extent of contamination, if any, found at the facility. All the work plans are listed on our website and on the DOB's website. On the south end of the property, near the Lafarge plant, there's a draft remedial investigation work plan that was submitted, and recently the department approved it in October of 2023. Before any work can be done, Holtec has to provide us with 14 days notice, which as of yet, maybe Frank can tell us when that's scheduled, but as of yet, we don't have a schedule for that. Speedies, which is the discharge, as Rick has spoken about. It's the discharge of water from the facility. It's ready. The Holtec Speedies have expired on April 30th of 2022. However, Holtec has submitted a timely renewal application, so they continue to have coverage under the existing Speedies permit pursuant to the State Administrative Procedures Law. We are undertaking a review of the permit application to determine what modifications, if any, is necessary. I think it was in October, DEC requested additional information from Holtec to provide us with the necessary points to do a full technical review. We received the information from Holtec in November of 2023. Once we complete the review, a draft speedies permit will be provided to the public. It will be noticed in the ENV, and after the comments, then we would issue it in accordance with DEC regulations. Currently, DEC is evaluating whether and to what extent the recent legislation signed by the governor will result, if it will result in any possible changes to the facility's speedies permit. A couple oversight activities. One of the speedies that governs the stormwater discharge from the Unit 2 transformer moat. On October 21st, Holtec reported to the department a non-compliance event. The speedies permit requires Holtec to collect a monthly sample prior to releasing the stormwater from the secondary containment zone. It appears as though it was an oversight. Prior to discharge in October, Holtec failed to take the sample that was required, and pursuant to, once they realized that action, they notified the department of that, They took a sample. It was it's a non-active secondary containment. They took a sample in October, and nothing was noted in the results. It's very similar to a rainfall event that occurred in September, taking a sample to the moat before you discharge it. We've never seen any situations like that have raised concern before, and Holtec has discussed that they're going to do some operator training to make sure that doesn't happen again. Earlier last week, Holtec reached out to both the DEC and the DPS involving a petroleum sheen that was noticed on the discharge canal. As you know, Cliff Chapin was already on site. DEC agency personnel also responded to understand the circumstances surrounding petroleum sheen that was noted in the discharge canal. And it emanated from a sump pit on the non-radiological side of the turbine building. During some work that was being done, it appears that some oil has gotten into the sump, and the sump did not activate or did not activate sufficiently to capture all the oil before it was discharged. As a result, some oil and water were discharged to the canal. Upon noticing that, Holtec shut down the sump pump, contacted their emergency environmental contractor, and placed in additional booms to absorbing petroleum in the discharge canal. All the petroleum was contained in the discharge canal, and neither DPS nor DEC observed any evidence of oil entering the Hudson River.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions for Dan?
I have a couple.
Yes, Assemblywoman?
Just on the review of the permit application to determine if a permit modification is necessary, what would govern that decision?
Dan, did you hear the question?
Yes, I heard the question. Unfortunately, I'm not in the division of water, so it's a question of where the standards are, what the releases have been in the past, and what the new permit would be. But that's something that our division of water technical staff would be reviewing.
Okay, and presuming that that is, that the Speedy's permit is issued, or the draft Speedy's permit is issued, and then there would be that opportunity for public review and comment, is there any kind of date anticipated when that might happen?
I don't have a date. The public will be notified via the ENB. The department also will notify everyone on the DOT, so everyone else, so it's on notice. Sometimes our permits, they don't always rise to the front page of the paper. So we will notify everybody. There'll be plenty of time for public review and comment before we issue it. It's not going to be a snap judgment.
And yeah, I'd like to request that we can.
Just for a clarification, the phrase ENB refers to the environmental notice bulletin. It's a formal state publication where DEC and other agencies notify the public regarding various environmental actions.
Great. So maybe we could just request that we also post it on the DOB website, and that we mention it in any upcoming meetings if we know about it before or close to the next meeting.
Sure. We'll post it on the DOB website and talk about it at each of the meetings that it's open.
Okay, great. And then the last question is, what changes could result as a result of the legislation in the Speedy's permit?
At this point, the department is not versed enough with the legislation and the requirements of it to determine what possible changes we would have to it. And that's part of the review process.
Okay, thank you.
In addition to the ENB, the Environmental Notice Bulletin, the applicant, Holtec, is also required to put the notice in the local paper. So it would be in the local paper, it would be in ENB, and also we would notify the DOB. So everyone's going to know about it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dan? Any on Zoom? No? Okay, thank you. So Frank Spagnoli is with us from Holtec to provide an operational update. We, as always, appreciate Holtec's participation in our meetings and being willing to answer our questions. I'll turn it over to you, Frank, to walk through your slides.
Okay, thank you. So just ignore the "you" in my name and you'll say it right.
Okay, sorry about that.
Everybody. Okay, so for my agenda, I'm going to go through what work we completed since the last meeting in September, which is the asphyxia project, dry fuel, vessel sag, and I added the Unit 1 demolition because that's been going on, but we haven't discussed it here, so I'll put a couple of pictures in there. We'll just talk about the liquid waste storage discussion, schedule changes, license amendments, NRC inspections and activities, and I'll update everybody on that. I'll give a little bit more detail into the oil spill and then the safety. The next slide. So for the dry fuel project, most of this was discussed. So there's a picture, aerial picture of the site with the new, that's all the casks on site. That white building near the casks is the new ICAS. So that entire area will become the protected area. When I say fuel and pad protected, that's what it means. You want me to wait?
Yeah, wait a second. If folks could please silence their phones, I'd appreciate it.
So that's what fuel on pad protected means. It means all the fuel is on the pad, and it is the Part 73 Code of Federal Regulations protected area. We will officially be there tomorrow. So right now, today is the first day that security is manning that position. The entire Part 73 fence, the existing one, is still in place. So tomorrow is the day. All the license amendments I'll talk about, they were all in, they're all enacted. So that is the milestone. There's the number of how many fuel assemblies, how many casks, and then I also added the greater than Class C casks. So that's fuel, it's waste that's hot, I'm sorry, I guess that's a phrase, that's highly radioactive, and it needs to get shipped to a DOE repository. It cannot be shipped to our repository in Texas. So we call them greater than Class C casks, and there's 2 of them in there now, and it's waste that was generated over the 50-year life and stored in the spent fuel pools. So over time, as we do vessel segmentation, there should be about 6 casks from each of the units, and then possibly 1 cask from Unit 1. And there's room on the pad for all those casks. That was what it was designed for. So that's it for dry fuel. Vessel segmentation. So as you know, our subcontractor for this is actually Holtec International, or Holtec Decommissioning International. So it's really, the company is doing its own vessel segmentation. We've been working, the way the schedule is laid out, we started with the Unit 3 upper internals. That work is complete. At the last DOB, we discussed it, and they started, the segmentation team started to work on Unit 3, and then they went back to Unit 2 to start doing the upper internals on Unit 2. And that was just a change in logistics. Just as we progressed the plan, more and more planning, we realized that the very bottom of the core barrel needed to be inverted in order to cut it with our existing source. We had to have a tool design, and it took about 6 months. So we just shifted from Unit 3 to Unit 2. So the plan now is we're going to take the Unit 2 internals, segment those. They'll go into A and BC boxes, which will be able to be shipped to Texas over time. And then we'll go back to Unit 3, do the core barrel or the lower internals, finish that. There will be greater than Class C casks there, and as well as A and BC boxes. And then we'll go back to Unit 2, and then we'll do the core barrel. At that point, vessel segmentation on Unit 2 and Unit 3 will be done, and I'll talk about the actual vessel when I talk about the schedule change. That is the schedule change. So on Unit 2, we set up for vessel segmentation. So that's the gantry saw, the aux bridge, and knuckle boom. And I have a couple of pictures on the next slide of what they look like. The reactor head has been removed from the reactor. It's in a stand. That will also be segmented. And the team is set up for the upper internal segmentation.
Mr. Spagnoli, can I just stop you a second just to say, when we're talking about vessel, you're talking about the reactor pressure vessel, right?
No.
No.
What I'm talking about so far So the reactor pressure vessel is what holds all of these. So the
Right.
reactor pressure vessel, then the core barrel goes in that, and then the fuel would normally go in, and then the upper internals are on top of that.
Right.
And then the head's on top of that.
Right.
Like a nesting doll. So we take it apart from the head, take the upper internals out, then the lower internals, and that all gets segmented underwater.
Okay.
Okay?
So sorry, I hope I'm not the only one that's not understanding this. So what I don't understand is which bits have you so far segmented?
So on Unit 3, the head has been segmented, and the upper internals have been segmented.
Okay.
On Unit 2, the head has been removed, we'll segment that, and we're working on the upper internals.
Okay, thank you.
Then we'll go back and forth. Yeah, so that's it for vessel seg. So these pictures,
And you say that,
Oh.
that happens underwater? Did you say that?
correct.
What water?
Oh, I'm sorry, the pictures didn't come through, I apologize for that. It was just to explain the knuckle boom crane is just a crane that sits on a platform and it extends out. So it's just very, very convenient to move things around as we're cutting them, rather than having to use the big overhead crane.
And so just what water?
What's that?
What water is used? Like, where is that water?
It's in the reactor cavity.
Okay, so, and that's different from the spent fuel pool water?
Correct.
It's not the same water?
Is it the same grade of water?
No? Is it the same actual water? Because I
Is it-
know that
is
at
it
one point,
Is it communicating with each other, is what you're asking?
no, it was my understanding at one point from Rich Baroni that water was moved from Unit 1 to Unit 2, like that there was some sort of underground system where the water from the spent fuel pools was used for this or that and kind of,
Okay.
shared. Let's
It's
just put it that
all-
way.
It's all the same water. It's all reactor coolant system water, right? So we kind of explained this, I think, when you visited. So
Yeah.
when we were operating, the spent fuel pool and the reactor cavity during an outage would communicate. They're at the same level. We'd open up a gate, and we'd be able to move fuel from the reactor side into the spent fuel pool. So ultimately, it's the same water. And as we drain down, when we're done with the outage, we'll isolate the gate. The spent fuel pool will sit there at 95 feet, and then we'll lower the cavity inside the containment, the big dome, and that water will go up to our RWST, Refueling Water Storage Tank. So that water was used for an outage, and it's sitting up in the tank, and then next time we go for an outage, we take the water out of the RWST, put it back in the cavity. But the vessel itself is part of the cavity, so that water's in the vessel. We'll put everything back together, we'll start up, we'll heat up, pressurize, that's all the same water. Okay?
Right.
Did I answer?
You just
Well-
described
I'm sorry, did I answer your
in
question?
operations, that was.
That's during
that was
operations,
during
so-
plant operations, that it's all the same water.
So is that the same,
But
you use
there's-
the same thing, you use the refueling water storage tank to flood up the
Correct.
cavity for segmentation?
Correct.
Okay. And it's not the cooling, I think you mentioned that it was the cooling water, but it's not the cooling water, right?
It is reactor coolant system water. It is what flowed through the reactor to cool the fuel.
No, to cool the spent fuel, I mean.
Spent, during a run, it's isolated. What I'm trying to say is,
Yeah.
this water, what the water that's...
When the
in-
reactor's operational, the spent fuel water isn't used for reactor cooling, right?
No.
No, okay, thank you.
But I think what you were asking is it the same type of water? So that's what I'm trying to... Right now, there is no communication between the spent fuel pool and any other system. There's no communication inside the reactor cavity with any other system. So,
But during operations, there was.
yes. And if
Right.
I took a sample of both water, it would be the same water.
Right, so what happens to the water that you flooded the reactor cavity with once you've done the segmentation?
Well, I'm going to talk about that here in a minute.
Oh, good.
That's the crux of the problem. Okay? Okay, so, Unit 1 demolition. So that's an overview of what the Unit 1 ball looks like. The Unit 1 ball is in the middle of Unit 2 and Unit 3. It's got the lower profile. And this would be, you couldn't see the cement, if you could see through all the steel, that's what you would see. And it's an old, it's a pressurized water reactor, same as Unit 2, Unit 3, but much smaller. And it has 4 loops, just like Unit 2, Unit 3, but again, much smaller. So we started segmenting all of the components around the reactor last year. So that's a 5-year project. Cut the loops out, cut the steam generators out, all of the components, the pressurizer, and all of that will be exempt waste that we'll be able to ship. It's not large, we could ship it in cargo containers down to Texas. So that'll be done over the next 5 years. The goal here is to get everything inside of the ball, it's a sphere really, gutted out so that we can go after the reactor. And the ultimate goal is to be able to pull the reactor whole. We should not have to segment this reactor because of the size, and it is transportable. So we just need to do a little bit more characterization to make sure that we can be able to ship it using DOT regulations. And that'll be done this year. The characterization will be done this year, and the decision will be made whether to segment it or pull it whole.
I think Senator Harkam has a question.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Frank. First of all, congratulations on the promotion. Quick question. So the reactor 1, just for the record, which workers and from what union are doing that work?
So the national labor agreement that we have with the unions is with the operating engineers, the IBEW electricians, the carpenters union, and the ironworkers. So those are the 4 trades that are doing all the work at Indian Point.
So who are the ones doing in reactor 1 for the next 5 years? Or I guess 4 years now, if you started last year.
The same 2 subcontractors, Champion and Westinghouse. Westinghouse has the rad techs, and Champion has the 4 craft that I just discussed.
Okay, and how many jobs will that be through the next, I guess it's 4 years now, you said it was 5 years, but you started last year.
I don't have that number on me. It's somewhere around 12, 15, and maybe 8 Westinghouse. I'm looking at my site leads for a little shake of the head.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So maybe 20 individuals, and HDI Oversight and Holtec International. Atkins is our subcontract
Okay,
for that one.
thank you.
Wait, so does HDI contract with Holtec International and Holtec International contracts with Champion and the other company?
HDI does not employ any of the union labor, right? So the subcontractors employ the labor.
Right, but you didn't answer my question, which is who are Champion and the Westinghouse contracting to? Which company?
For Unit 1, Champion is contracting to Atkins, and Westinghouse is contracting to HDI. That's the way with the agreement was established. Okay? So here's a couple of pictures of Unit 1, just to give you an idea. On the right side, that is 1 reactor coolant pump, and you can see the guy standing to the left of that to give you a perspective of the size. And so what we're doing is we're diamond wire sawing all the loops and pulling the loops, the valves, the pumps out. The top picture is where it's staged on the top elevation inside the ball, and the bottom picture is where it's wrapped, filled with foam, and ready to ship by rail. And then the picture in the middle is the top of the pressurizer, and the picture on the side is just a couple of internal fans, and those are what we'll go after in 2024. Okay, liquid waste discharge. So at the last meeting, we had a couple of outside vendors interested in proposing tritium, removing tritium from the liquid waste. So we entertained both of those proposals. The first one was with Veolia. They discussed potential tritium removal using a modular detritation system. And currently that technology is not in use at any sites or commercial applications. It's in use at a lab. It has been in use at a commercial site, not in this country, I think it was Canada, I don't remember. The processing system has limits. It can only do 40 gallons per hour, and it's a large energy, because basically it's a large energy consumption, about in the megawatt region per hour. So it's a large energy burner. Is at least 1 year to design the system that we would need at Indian Point, to procure it, build it, get the engineering done. We did have a conference with them. They have the action to give me some financial, a prospectus, a plan, what they could do if they can improve the 40 gallons per hour. Because basically, based on that 40 gallons per hour and the limits on processing, recircing, doing samples, it would take almost a decade to remove 1.5 million gallons. So, still open to it. We'll reach out to them again. They haven't reached back. I know Tom is kind of involved a little bit there, and we'll entertain it. The next one is a little bit more, really, we cannot entertain it. Basically, this was the hemp company. So their approach utilizes the natural abilities of plants to absorb and store contaminants. They plant hemp in a hydroponic system within a greenhouse. The hydroponic system delivers liquid wastewater, which is where the tritium is, and nutrients directly to the plant roots, promoting healthy growth. And then they harvest it, and this biomass to pyrolysis basically heats it up and it becomes a gas. A thermal decomposition process in the absence of oxygen in the greenhouse or a dedicated facility, and you can see the rest. The bottom line is I can't grow hemp per NRC regulations, so if this company can get approved through the NRC, we can entertain it.
So you met with this company?
No. I read their prospectus, ran it by, and then it does not meet NRC requirements and
You can
Code
grow
of
hemp
Federal
in New York.
regulations. Huh?
You can grow hemp in New York.
NRC, pot is legal in New York, it's not with the NRC. So their NRC has their own
Hemp
rules.
isn't pot.
Need a license amendment.
Hemp
Hemp
isn't
is
pot.
not pot.
It's not pot.
I understand it's not. It's just they cannot be grown inside of a protected area in a nuclear power plant. If they want to go through the effort of an NRC approval, then we can discuss it.
But isn't it,
Got a unique branding angle.
Yeah. Yeah.
isn't the core problem,
Point gold.
Yeah, nobody from the company ever tried to contact us, so we read their information and
Right.
we ran it through.
A couple of questions. There's one on Zoom and one from Richard.
well,
Go ahead,
I
Richard.
think the core problem with this is that you're going to end up burning it and then releasing the radioactivity to the environment, right? So what's
It really is a long evaporation process.
Yeah.
That's really what it is, so.
And the biochars, Jay Crane, the biochars is still contaminated, so, you know,
Yeah.
they were talking about putting that into plant life,
Yeah.
put it out into farmland, but it's still contaminated, so.
It would solidify a portion of it and release the rest as a gas.
Okay, so thanks for looking into it.
It was fun.
Tom Carey, I think you had a question on Zoom?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Again, for Frank, so I'm trying to wrap my head around these agreements. Could you describe which agreement you're currently working on, Unit 1, that you just described, Frank?
Oh, sorry, can you go back a couple slides?
So,
Unit 1 work?
so I'm under the Holtec Decommissioning International has an agreement with the 4 unions that I discussed, and that's the agreement that I'm under. Is that what you're asking? The national?
So originally, that agreement was signed a couple of years back with just the 3 trades, right? The operating engineers, the electricians, and the laborers. How did that now increase to other trades?
The national, I don't really know the details, so hold on, Pat's gonna
Yeah,
talk.
Pat O'Brien, Director of Government Affairs and Communications for Holtec. When the initial, I think it was a 3-year agreement at the national level, was ending, we opened it up, offered it to 5 unions at the time. 4 of those unions chose to sign on to the national labor agreements, and that's the 4 that we have right now.
Okay. Because I just, going back a couple of years back, I kept asking the question. They said, no, this was a locked agreement that went back probably, if I had to guess, I would say a minimum of 5 years ago. And it was just the 3 that I stated, the OEs, the electricians, and the laborers. So I just was curious how the craft was able to get in on an agreement that was locked, 5 years ago.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what you're referencing 5 years ago, Tom. I've been with the company 4 years. I was kind of going through the process when the contracts were open and offered, and really all I can tell you is that 4 of the 5 unions chose to sign, and that's where we are now and what we operate under.
Okay. And nobody's working under the general president's agreement, just this Holtec agreement?
So when the Asphyxia construction and dry fuel project was ongoing, that was under the president's agreement. If we did any construction on site, that would be under the president's agreement. The national labor agreement is specifically for demolition.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Senator Harcum, did you have another question?
I did, thank you. Dave Lockbaum gave a presentation a few meetings ago on different options that the NRC approves. In fact, when the NRC was here, they again stated they have no preference on one particular method as long as it's one of the ones that they've approved. So I see, and I thank you for looking at alternative technologies here. Did you look at the other modalities for dealing with the water that the NRC approves, and what are the timelines associated with those other options?
I don't have that much detail on timelines, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't have timelines per se, but, you know, since this issue arose in Massachusetts, it's something that we've looked at all available options. I think we've kind of always said, you know, eventual disposition of water, we had intended to probably utilize all options. Obviously, legislation challenges the water discharge here, but we have looked at the others, and we're still kind of working through that process since the impact of the legislation.
Because I think the timeline is critical. If we're talking, you're talking about an 8-year pause, I think it's prudent that, you know, you look at the other options and what are the timelines. If that's what we're talking, because of water, we have to push the timeline back. We've got to investigate those other options to see if there's a shorter timeline.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying, Senator, and I can appreciate the comments.
I'm a little bit mystified. So in Massachusetts, you said there are basically 4 options, one of which is long-term storage, correct?
No, I have not said that we've
Well,
looked
there's
at
a letter
long-term
here
storage.
from June 6th, 2022, from
Richard?
Mr. Singh.
Richard, can you make sure you're using your mic?
Oh, sorry. There's a letter here from Dr. Singh that says there are basically 4 options. Discharge, trucking to another facility, evaporation, and long-term on-site storage, right?
Yeah.
Does that sound plausible?
It's something that would have to be permitted through the NRC. What we look at.
No, it wouldn't.
Yes,
The
it would.
NRC
Yes.
said that long-term site storage would not have to be permitted when they were here.
I understand what you're saying, Richard. To do it where they asked us in Massachusetts, it would.
Well, maybe
it was not in the places that are already
All right.
currently registered.
Do you know whether it would need to be permitted here or not?
I believe if you are not using something that is currently there, you would need to go through the NRC process for the construction, yes.
All right, well, the NRC said you wouldn't, so that's something to be resolved. But my question really is, have you finished studying these options?
We continue to look at all the options.
Okay, have you finished?
No.
No.
Okay, how do you know that you need an 8-year delay if you haven't finished studying these options?
To be honest with you, we're 2 years into this process in Massachusetts, and we're no closer to a resolution. We believe 8 years is the right timeline for resequencing the work that Frank has, looking at available options, including legal action, as an appropriate timeline to extend the project.
Well,
Could I interrupt?
give me a basis for that. Why is that an appropriate timeline?
2 years into it in Massachusetts with no closer resolution, you assume that any legal challenge would be a 4 to 6 year process. You're looking at a minimum of 8 years.
Well, it's up to you whether you bring a legal challenge, isn't it?
Yeah,
Okay, so you're saying that's open still?
absolutely,
That's one of the options?
absolutely.
Is it
Okay.
conceivable that an option is identified that could accelerate the schedule and you could change the schedule again?
It's something that would have to be discussed, yes, but I'm sure that there are alternatives. As we've said, it's liquid discharge, it's evaporative discharge, it's trucking or shipping for liquid discharge or evaporative. Depending on what a timeline could be, yes. you
Or
could
long-term site storage, correct?
Sure, except the host community here has said they will not permit that. So that's not
Right.
really a
Do you need-
viable
do you
option.
need a
unless-
permit from them?
Unless you'd like to do that in the section of the site that is in Cortland and not in Buchanan.
Well, I just want to make sure that we understand the basis of your 8-year extension. In Massachusetts, you said that there was a 4-year extension because you were short of money.
No, we said water at the beginning.
No,
too,
you said the
Richard.
main reason was a
Richard, we
financial.
said-
I just looked at the video.
Okay.
You said you said the main reason was financial, and the secondary reason was water.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is there a financial reason for an extension here?
No.
Okay. So you said the second 4-year extension was due to discharge problems, right?
It's an additional realistic timeline, yes.
So here you have an easier situation in Massachusetts, but you're asking for the same extension, is that correct?
No, I don't believe it's an easier situation.
Of course it is,
here.
because you don't have a financial problem.
No, it's not. I have a legal issue.
Of course you've got a legal issue in both places, same legal issue.
Okay, Richard.
It's easier here because you've got money, right? Isn't having money easier than not having money?
There's plenty of money in Pilgrim as well.
Well, you delayed 4 years for lack of money.
I understand that.
That wasn't what you were saying at the time.
Richard, that is due to the losses in the trust fund last year. To be good stewards of the trust fund, we are required to make these decisions and ensure that there's enough funds at the end.
So you're going to accelerate Massachusetts because now you've got money?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm still haven't gotten through the main issue.
Jim, did you have a question?
I did. James Creighton. I recognize your timeline, and I appreciate your confidence in your lawyers, I guess, on legal strategy. But I think you clearly have a lot of confidence in the engineers at Holtec and the casts that you guys make, right?
Correct.
So I assume that with all these things going on in Pilgrim and here and other places, your engineers have been working on casks that don't leak, that don't have bladder problems, that can have bladders changed out. So I know that Mayor Buchanan was dead set against permitting casks on site that would leak. Who wants that? But I'm sure that your engineers are the best in the world because you've told us that, and that they make the best casks, and that they clearly must have a solution to what Mr. Lockbaum had suggested is a failure problem. Why can't casks be made so that they can hold water?
We're a cask company that is designed to hold spent nuclear fuel. We are not a cask company that designs to hold water.
Have you looked for a company that can do that?
I don't know offhand, Richard.
Can you get back to me on that, please?
Sure.
And if you haven't looked for it, please look for it.
Okay.
Assemblywoman Levenberg?
I guess, Pat, I just had some questions about timing. I mean, it seems like Holtec kind of put all their eggs in this one basket. And it's not like this was always clear from the beginning. There was a lot of pushback, first in Massachusetts, and then here. There's a lot of public pushback for over a year. I mean, again, if you loop in Massachusetts, you said, I think, at least
2 years. Yeah.
2 years. And, you know, so knowing that this wasn't something that the public embraced, knowing that there were other options, I don't understand also, I guess, with what Richard's saying is why isn't there a timeline for Plan B, Plan C? It seems like, you know, again, in the world of nuclear power plants, you always kind of have to have those backup plans.
Absolutely, and what I would say to you, Assemblywoman, is that we believed when we signed both the state agreement with Massachusetts and the joint proposal with the state of New York, we understood what the playing field looked like. Those have then, since those agreements were signed, a law has been enacted here, and a permit modification was denied, tentatively denied in Massachusetts, that changed what was expected and what was understood when the schedule was developed. So when the rules change in the middle of it, you have to adjust, and that's where we are.
You also said that the trust funds had dipped, and I thought that John just pointed out that it was $557 million at the end of 2022 and $558 million at the end of 2023 for Unit 1, $618 million at the end of 2022, and $619 million at the end of 2023 for Unit 2.
Yes.
And then Unit 3, where presumably a lot of the money had been actually spent on the decommissioning process, $741 million and $792 million. So the only one that was more than $1 million differential was Unit 3, where, again, we don't really know because we haven't seen how the money is being spent out of that fund. But theoretically, there was almost no change in, so how was that,
How are you saying?
How are those trust funds?
I'm not talking about Indian Point's trust fund when I said it was dipped. We talked about a 4-year exchange at Oyster Creek off of last year's performance, end of 12/31/22 fund balances. We looked at the fund balance for Oyster Creek and Pilgrim and made adjustments accordingly for 4 years. Part of that was water in Massachusetts. Part of it was funds. Same thing at Oyster Creek. We did not make that change back in March for these funds. These funds, we felt did not necessitate that change.
okay. I thought you had just mentioned making a change based on funds.
That was a question about Pilgrim.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So I have a quick follow-up, which is, what's your schedule for completing your study of on-site storage options?
I don't have a timeline, Richard.
Okay, when are you going to give me a timeline?
I'm not going to commit.
I'm not going to commit to give a timeline.
Are you going to commit to doing that study?
We continue to work through the process, and we provide information as we have it.
Are you going to commit to doing that study or not?
I'm not committing to anything, Richard.
You're not committing to anything. Thank you very much.
No, I'm
Great.
not, no, Richard, I appreciate it, what you bring to the board, but you constantly play a game where you try to get us to.
I'm not
commit to
playing a game here. I'm trying to get this
Okay.
this wastewater dealt with
And I'm just
effectively.
being honest with
and
you
trying to
that I'm
move
not
this
gonna-
decommissioning ahead.
Okay.
And you are just telling me that you're not prepared to do obvious studies.
No, what I'm saying is we are looking at all available options. That may include a study.
So when are you going to finish looking at the on-site storage
You're looking
option?
for a timeline that I can't tell you off the top of my head, Richard. I
Well,
said
I'm
I
not
will
asking
bring
you for the
that
top of my head.
information.
Give it to me next week if you want.
Okay, Richard. I
Can
said
you
I
give
will
it?
bring it to you when it's
You
available.
said you couldn't give me a schedule. Can you give me a schedule?
Excuse
when
me.
you will start that study?
Excuse me.
Yes.
We're not going to commit to a timeline at this meeting.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to tell Tom, if you're asking us for a commitment, we need it in writing to go through our legal department.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's fine. But just,
So next
just
week,
let
next
me
month,
know.
next
Give me a
year,
timeline when you can get back. You'll give me a
ask-
timeline when you can finish your decommissioning.
Put your
Can you give me a timeline when you can get
request-
back to me?
Put your request in writing.
No,
and-
my request is here now, okay? My request is
Let's calm
for
down,
a
sir.
schedule.
Let's calm down. Let's
Okay.
have an adult conversation.
I'm having an adult conversation.
An adult
Thank you, Timothy.
conversation calmly.
My request, let me be very
Let's not start fighting
specific.
here.
My request is for a schedule for when you will complete a study of on-site storage options. Now,
Tom, will
when
pro-
do you think
Tom,
you'll
will
be able to
provide
tell me
us
when
that
you
in
can give me
writing so I
that
can
schedule?
Give it to my legal team.
We'll take, well, Richard could provide a request in writing if you'd
I
like.
mean, I can provide a request.
And,
It's
and
kind of
Richard,
pointless.
Richard, I
you.
got a question.
Yeah.
Is it your position, and is it Riverkeeper's position, that Holtec is unambiguously compelled to provide that to you?
No, Holtec has
That's
said-
all I need. No, that's all I need.
No.
Thank you. No, thank you. Now, I want to correct the record here. Assemblyperson Levenberg, I think you were just recently discussing some numbers in your colloquy with
Those are the
Pat
notes I took that you had
and
recited.
Frank. Well, I want to make sure the record is clear. The numbers that I was quoting and that I read into the record were from December 31st, 2022.
Right?
I think I heard you say 2023. So it was December 31st, 2022.
There was a comparison between, both numbers were read, and I think, I don't know, Tom Congdon, were you the one who
And I
read the
think
numbers
he's-
first?
Yeah, I think you said as of March 2023.
That
But that's
they were the-
probably.
Yeah, that's the public
It's the
report.
So the way it,
The-
the
yeah.
way it works is
They were
the
different
accounting term runs through December 31st each year. And then the NRC allows regulated entities to have 90 days to check their books, do their auditing, and then provide the report. So that report will ordinarily come in at the end of the first quarter of the next year. So in this case, it came in around, on or about March 31st, 2023. But it is current as of December 31st,
Right.
2022. So I
Okay.
just want to clear that for the record.
Okay,
And
so
John-
then, could you clarify the Unit 3 number? Because,
So I'll read the record, I'll read the numbers again. For Indian Point Unit 1 Trust, it was 557 million. For Indian Point Unit 2 Trust, it was 618 million. And for Indian Point Unit 3 Trust, it was 741 million. And that information came in to Adams, the NRC's document management system, at the end of March 2023. So that's, I'm referring back to a March 2023 report as of balances for the end of December 2022 for those three separate trusts.
okay, well, we're gonna get some more information about this trust anyway, so maybe we could get some kind of comparison about how that looks compared to the time before that it was reported, so we know what the movement, what the shift is.
Yeah, I'm having a difficulty following.
We committed to talking with Holtec about making additional information available between the annual
Thanks.
reports at the request of DOB members, right? So we can follow up.
We'll see what's available, but what I can say is, the annual report is very detailed, so we can show, what the projections were when we did the filing on March 31st, 2022 for the 2021 year, 2022, and we continue to do those every year. So you'll see how they are adjusted. Some of that is related to how the funds perform, and some of that is related to work, and we can show that.
And can I just want to make a quick
No,
jump?
excuse me, I'm not finished yet, Richard.
Well, John, you cut me off earlier, so please give me a chance to
excuse
let me
me,
finish.
yeah, come
Yeah,
on,
don't
Richard.
cut me off and then
No.
and then say I can't cut you off.
Excuse me, I'm in the middle of a concept here.
Okay, go
Okay?
ahead.
We're all New Yorkers, and we should all be able to respect each other.
I hope so.
Like Senator Harcum asked us at the September meeting, and I'm going to reiterate, and I'm going to invoke the great Senator Harcum and his call for civility. So, I want to come back to Assemblyperson Levenberg. There was a report at the end of the first quarter of 2022 that went back to 2021. We can provide that. That is available on Adams. And there will be another report, likely in 4 months,
Where's Jan?
that will give us the financial balances as of 3 weeks from now.
And that will be
This
a
year.
great time to look at the comparison from 2021,
We can-
2022 to 2023.
And 2021 to 2022.
Exactly. I think I just said that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is now a good time?
I agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Thank you. So I just want to get back to this on-site storage issue and just mention that
Are you talking to your mic?
my client, I think a lot of other people, I think the state, I hope, shares the goal of getting this decommissioning done as expeditiously as possible. I hope Holtec shares that goal too.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we believe that on-site storage is likely to be able to be achieved well within 8 years, and therefore should provide a means to reduce this delay, if not eliminate it. I'm very disappointed that you seem reluctant to even study the option.
It is an option that we can look at, Richard, but it is not realistic based on the host community's decision to say they do not and will not allow on-site storage.
Perhaps if you
Richard, you
studied
a-
it
you
and the host
asked
community saw how it could work, they might change their minds.
That's a discussion that you need to have with the on-site, the host community.
No,
Well,
We talk
Richard.
to them
if-
regularly,
yeah,
and we
I think
understand that point.
we're beating
Richard and
this
I
horse a
love
bit.
to talk.
yeah,
Yes.
we talk regularly
Yes,
too.
every day, right, Richard? Go out to lunch, everything. So Richard, I remember there was a meeting, and you specifically asked me, do you have a resolution? So I said, no, but I will have one. And on July 5th, the village board all agreed unanimously to do a resolution that there would be no storage above or below ground or anywhere within the village of Buchanan. So you asked me if I had that, so I complied with
Okay.
your ask.
So if Holtec devised a means of storing the tritium on-site or the wastewater on-site where leakage was extremely unlikely, and it could accelerate the decommissioning of the reactor and ensure that these carpenters are not laid off, would you oppose that?
I would not oppose, if anything, that would not allow people to lose their jobs, especially the people that we've had there on site who have extreme knowledge of that plant. And that's what we're going to lose with this 8-year delay now.
No, I know, but I'm asking
Okay.
you to say, can we work together to shorten this 8-year delay and work with Holtec?
I'm not going to put any storage on that property that is going to hurt anybody.
Correct.
Okay, so if it leaks, that's not a viable option. If it vents from the top and it falls all around on the ground, which as Dave Lockbaum told us what the drawbacks were of this, so it's not a viable option. We're looking for a viable option.
So I will just say that I think it's in all of our interest at this table to see the decommissioning schedule get back on track. And as we've done since our inception, I think the DOB can play an important role in getting more information out there. I think all of us also respect that the law was changed. And with the law change, we have to take seriously options that previously have been discounted. What was feasible when compared against a legal process that had been in place for many years, or I should say what was infeasible against that option may now be more feasible. And so at our next meeting, which will be scheduled February 29th, we have invited Arnie Gunderson, at the suggestion of some community members, who has looked at the on-site storage option. He has a presentation that's online. The link has been distributed, I think, to everyone. I'd encourage Holtec to review the presentation, and all of the DOB members, if you haven't already reviewed it, develop your questions. I hope Arnie will accept our invitation. And if he comes, there could be a robust discussion about on-site storage, what it means. Holtec can review and talk about what the implications might be for the site. You guys have more information about the site than anyone. And we will continue to provide a venue for that kind of information exchange. And we will look as well at other options and bring other people in to talk about what occurred at Vermont Yankee, with transport off-site. So it's very much in all of our interest and in the public interest to respect the change in law and to evaluate what other options may be feasible and what we can do to facilitate knowledge exchange to the point where maybe there is a feasible option that Holtec is agreeable to and that can get things back on track from a scheduling standpoint. I think what they've presented today, and I want to get back to Frank's presentation here in a minute, but what you've presented in terms of accepting a business-to-business meeting with Veolia at our request is a demonstration that you are taking other options seriously, and I think that we can expect there to be a robust discussion at our next meeting to get to the next level of understanding on some of these other options. Is that fair? So maybe, Frank, you can get back to, because there are a couple of more slides on schedule.
Yeah, actually, we haven't gotten the schedule change slide yet. Okay, so this is our milestone schedule, and this is what we changed. So if you look right in the center, you see the two small square boxes. And what I was talking about before with the reactor vessel segmentation, core barrel, which are also called the lower assembly, lower internals segmentation. Once that's complete, then that's where the pause on vessel segmentation will occur for 8 years. So what that did is that pushed out their partial site release for 8 years. And the reason for that...
Frank, sorry, I don't understand how you see the change from this chart. Can you just enlighten me how I can see a change?
I'm telling you, the only change is those square boxes right in the middle. If you read them, I know it's small, but it says reactor vessel segmentation, Unit 3, Unit 2. So if you see the big gap between...
Internal segmentation Unit 2 is over here in 2024, right?
Correct, that's on track.
Okay. And where were these before, these two boxes?
They were right next to each other.
Just after?
Well, they were 8 years earlier. That's the change.
They were to the left, right?
Yep.
Yes, to the left, sorry.
They were they were sequenced after the...
Correct.
The internal segmentation.
So my next sentence is going to explain why.
Okay.
Okay, so like I was saying before, the reactor cavity is what we're working in. Right now, that's flooded up to 95 foot. Whenever I say elevations, it's off the river. It's just the way we measure things at the plant. So right now, the water level is at 95 foot. The bottom of the reactor, the very top of the reactor vessel, not the internals, the vessel, is at 68 foot. So right now, it's about 30 feet of water. The vessel itself is part of the cavity. It's welded to the cavity, otherwise the water would not be able to stay in the cavity. So it's welded. So in order for me to go after the vessel, I need to drain the cavity. So basically, what we're talking about with the bill is immediately I cannot finish up the internals segmentation and immediately drain down because I don't have any space for that water. So that's going to be a reservoir for 300,000 gallons of water that's in there.
How many?
About 300,000 gallons in the cavity.
Thank you.
Until we determine what our path is.
Can I just ask you a question there? Because didn't you say that you got that water from the refueling water storage tank?
Correct.
Could you not put it back in there?
I don't have any other storage space. The refueling water storage tank is designed to hold reactor coolant system water. So I'm going to be making waste just as I'm progressing through any process. That waste now, that storage tank is what I'm going to have to put any other waste that comes to me into.
Wait, but you're taking 300,000 gallons out?
It's already out.
Okay, it's already out. So how much headroom do you have in the refueling water storage tank?
I don't have any numbers on me, and it's really irrelevant Because
Why? Why is it relevant?
It's irrelevant because you don't really, I don't have enough internal storage tanks to hold 1.5 million gallons of water.
No, I understand that, but what I thought what you were saying was that there was 300,000 gallons that was stopping you from getting to one of these reactor segmentation jobs. Did I misunderstand?
Yes,
I did misunderstand.
I think so.
I thought that's what
Okay.
you said.
How much water is there?
That's what it sounded like you
Yeah.
said. You said it sounded
I
like
don't-
you have 300,000 gallons
So-
that you need to get
so
rid of right
basically-
now.
In each cavity.
Right, so you've taken
One at a
600,000
time,
gallons.
one at a time.
Right, so you've taken 600,000 gallons out of the refueling water storage tank,
No,
correct?
it's a 360,000 gallon tank.
Okay. Where did the other water come from?
It's been in the process system the entire time, when you run the reactor.
Okay, so you have storage in the process. So you have, so you have,
It's been in the reactor coolant system.
Right, so
The
you have
water
some
through the
storage.
systems, plus the water that was in the tanks, now everything is in that
Okay.
one volume.
okay, so you have some storage, and do you still have some storage in the coolant system?
Do I have some storage in which
In
system?
the coolant system, the system you said
No.
it was storing?
No, that's
Didn't you
what
just tell me that?
That, I said it's all water that's in the same
No,
coolant
but
system.
wait, I want you to be precise when you answer my questions, please, because this is getting very confusing, okay? I asked you, did you take 600,000 gallons out of the refueling water storage tank?
And we
You
said no.
No, right? But how much did you take out of the refueling water storage tank?
What was in there during
So-
operation?
360, the refueling water storage tank on both units is 360,000 gallons.
Each.
Each?
Yes.
Okay. And how much
We-
water did you take out of those tanks?
About 300,000 gallons.
Okay.
From each.
From, right.
Well, yeah, Unit 2, we're still in the process of filling the cavity. but
Right,
it will be
okay.
that.
But that's you'll take out 300,000 gallons from each tank?
Correct.
Correct? Okay, and then how much waste are you going to generate separate to this water that's in the cavity?
As little as possible,
Okay, estimate?
because
10,000 gallons?
as little as possible, so I don't have a plan on what to do with the water. So that's why these
Well, I
projects
mean-
are going to end.
My question is, why can't you pump the water back into the refueling water storage tank?
Because I need that volume for any other liquid waste that gets generated over
but-
the next whatever years I'm doing work.
Can you give some examples of how the liquid waste would be generated to maybe help give some?
So,
But I'd like an estimate of that. Do you not have an estimate of that? the
no, I
volume?
don't have an estimate.
Let
of
him give
that.
some,
I have to be
examples.
prepared for a worst case.
Sure, the worst case is that, the thing, you can't get rid of this water, right? But look, why can't we operate on the basis that you move the job along as fast as possible? It doesn't seem like you're trying to do that. Couldn't you use one of the tanks and?
I have to be able to get rid of the liquid waste to proceed. I have 300,000 gallons in the cavity and 260,000 gallons in the spent fuel pool. That's more than 360,000 gallons. So I cannot proceed.
Right, no, wait. I thought you said these segmentation jobs, the spent fuel pool's isolated from these, right?
It is.
Right, so you don't need to empty the spent fuel pool to do these.
So the water's going to stay in the spent fuel pool too.
I know, but you don't need to, you can isolate the spent fuel pool and then you can drain out this cavity, right?
I can.
Right.
I don't have any place to put it.
Why can't you put it? Let me repeat the question.
Because the refueling water storage tank is now my only storage tank that I have for any other liquid waste that's generated.
Okay, so can we go back to Tom's question, which is where does this other liquid waste come from?
Any other decommissioning activities require water. It requires water to decontaminate, it requires water to cut, it requires water for everything. So any of that waste, anything that we generate, I have to have storage for it.
So once you
I
finish
don't
this-
have an infinite
Richard, let him
supply of
finish the
storage
sentence.
right now.
Sure, we all get that. I mean, this is, I mean, I don't, of course you don't have an infinite amount of storage. The question is how do you optimally deploy the storage that you've got, right?
Yes. And I have
my
to,
question is-
I have to keep it in reserve because I don't know how long this is going to go on, right?
I mean, it seems like it's going to go on forever if you're not trying very hard to get rid
Can
of
I
the
just,
water,
can
right?
I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Frank, can you just clarify, this is contaminated water in the
Correct.
refueling water storage tank?
Liquid waste.
Liquid waste, right? And is it safe in there, or is it leaking?
No, there's no leak. In the refueling cavity?
Yeah,
On unit 3, no.
no leaking.
No.
Is
Right, so
there
could you-
evaporation?
could you
Is there any
get-
evaporation from it?
Well, it's natural evaporation. There's always natural evaporation. Your coffee's evaporating right now.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
that's nature. I can't do anything about that.
So let me just summarize, make sure I've understood this. You've got two refueling water storage tanks. Their total capacity is around 720,000 gallons. Is that correct?
Correct.
They have about 60,000 gallons in each right now.
That's what I don't get.
I don't know what the level in the Unit 3, because we've been using that for storage. I don't know.
Okay, well,
And Unit 2 is not empty yet, so.
could I suggest to you that a little more data might be helpful? Because trying to optimize a problem when you don't have data is very hard.
I understand your question.
All I can suggest is that I think that you could look at deploying these storage tanks in a way that we might be able to speed up the job.
I believe you made that point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And can I just ask one more question about the refueling water storage tanks? Were those, who built those?
Whoever built the plant, Westinghouse, I'm not sure if they subbed it out to Chicago Bridge and Iron in 1974.
But again, that tank doesn't leak. That holds wastewater.
No, it was designed.
Contaminated water. Doesn't leak.
It was designed not to leak, yes. It was also designed seismic. It was designed to be an emergency. That was our emergency core cooling system, was the RWST.
I mean, it does seem to beg the question, if you can store this contaminated water for periods of time, many years, in tanks that don't leak, why can't we do that with the spent fuel pool water?
Because you wouldn't fully be able to decommission the facility.
My next slide, I could talk about it.
Let's go on to the
Okay.
next slide.
Okay, so I think I discussed everything here. So the concept that I hope everybody understands, that the reactor vessel itself is part of the cavity. I cannot remove the reactor vessel with water in the cavity. So that's really the crux of the problem. So basically, that's going to delay the segmentation of the cavity of the vessel itself. And on the next, go to the next slide, and I'll try to talk through this. This is a really busy slide, and it'd be much better if it was on your computer and you can blow it up. But I want to give you an overview of the problems. The solutions that are being presented do not solve the problem of pulling partial site release back in 8 years.
Frank,
Okay?
can you get closer to your mic?
I
Thanks.
can't get closer to my mic. So so the solutions have, of where we would put tanks. So let me just, if you can make that as big as you can. The color codes, I love colors, you'll notice that. The color codes are, everything that's yellow has an electrical power supply. The blue is a building that contains liquid waste, and the pink.
There's no grill. Blue.
I'm sorry, the green. It's green. And the pink, does everybody agree pink?
Yes.
Pink is buildings that I need to move the liquid waste, right? So whether it's in the spent fuel pool, or in the VC, or in Unit 1, or in the PAB, all of those support buildings have the installed equipment, the designed engineered piping, tanks, pumps, in order to move liquid waste around. So everything in the middle, the two domes, obviously, the spent fuel pools, and the support buildings, the primary auxiliary buildings, those are they all have liquid waste in them. The Unit 1 dome itself still has liquid waste in some of the components. And what Richard was talking about is, I don't really, there's water in the steam generators that has to get drained in order for us to remove them. And that is a plan that I need to work on, right? So that could delay Unit 1 work if we can't come up with a plan. So I'm looking for a solution. We are working on it. I know it sounds like we are, but I'm not going to give you any timelines on what we're talking about. So the yellow. So right now, all of our power comes in underground from Buchanan, and it follows basically that arrow that runs down the alley. There's 3 independent 13.8 kV feeds, and then they run into the Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 3 turbine halls. From there, they go to all of the support buildings. Everything powered on Unit 1, 2, and 3 comes in off those 3 feeds and powers everything up. So even the turbine building, I wouldn't be able to remove the entire turbine building without affecting the electrical power to the rest of the station. And since we're sitting here, I need electrical power. I need reliable electrical power to make sure that all of my equipment is working, because we're going to be in a different period. So in order to take down the turbine building, you got to remove all the equipment, remove all the hazards, and you go cold and dark. That means you cut and you gap all of the electrical cables going into it, and then you can take that building down. So that has an impact
I need the electrical power. I'm not gonna start running temporary diesels all over the place, or, extension cords, what we call power, temporary power supplies. They're not as reliable.
Frank,
That's-
can I just ask a quick question? Can't you shut off the power to one building without interrupting the entire system? I mean, we see that in renovation projects all the time, where the contractor can shut off the power to one building without disrupting the power of the entire block.
And frankly,
That's
what
where
Coned's been working on.
but they don't go back to the switch yard and take it out, right? So it would be like Con Ed would have to cut the power up in Buchanan, which would affect everything. Our distribution system is in the non-contaminated part of the plant, and it goes through the turbine halls. From the turbine halls, it goes everywhere. So what I'm trying
Right,
to...
I get what you're saying, that the distribution goes everywhere, but it seems to me you should be able to cut off the power for any individual building
Yeah.
out of the entire system to be able to take that building down without disrupting your entire power grid.
I can, but I can't take down, what I'm trying to point to here, I can't take down the VC dome and leave the cavity full, right? So
No,
the
that I
process,
understand.
I can't take down the
But you
spent
were
fuel
talking-
pool and leave the spent fuel pool full.
Right, no, that we get, but you were talking about, for instance, I think the generator, and other outbuildings that are not essential to holding the water, that theoretically could come down if you cut the power off to individual buildings. It's not gonna,
I don't disagree. So if you, I know this is very busy drawing, and I'd be more than happy to go stand at the window with you and look at it. But I can take down the EDG buildings, but they're buried in there, right? So we will take them down. It's just that right now, that's not a priority, right? So, so I'm kind of trying to give you it's 250 acres, but that's only about 30 acres right there, and that's where everything is. So in order to get to partial site release, you have to remove all the buildings. You have to remove all the buildings, and you have to dig down, because everyone knows there is a plume of waste from the spent fuel pool, from the sins of the past, that we have to deal with. So in order to get to partial site release, between the DEC and the NRC, in order to get to less than 10 MR and clean soil, the buildings need to be down. And they go down to bedrock. This entire plant was built on bedrock. So this is impacting. I know, I get a sense that you don't believe what I'm saying. I will walk you around buildings if I need to prove it to you. But I can't take down any primary auxiliary building, because that's where the design tanks and pipes and pumps are, eventually to transfer waste. Even if I transferred it to an off-site tank, I still need that building in order to do it. If I ship it to Idaho or Texas or anywhere, I still need that building to do it. So we're in a holding pattern here until we make a decision.
Can I ask
Okay?
you, where are
And
the-
this is, I know that you really thought that we believed this law would pass. We didn't until the day it was signed, okay? So we really,
Say it again?
we did not believe this law would pass, because it's unreasonable, and we do believe that we have all the rights to do this. This is a law that was passed in New York State, and we're obeying it. But honestly, we did not take this law and come up with contingency plans because we thought it was so outrageous.
I'm just going to say that I think that part right there, I mean, you're actually putting the responsibility of the loss of work on us, but in terms of the timing, how this happened, and laying this out, gets back to what you just said, which is that you didn't believe this law would pass. And we know that there was an incredible public outcry. People were very upset. There are certainly outside authorities who have disagreed with the NRC in terms of what the safety is of discharging this treated water into the Hudson River. So many people want us to protect our valuable asset that we've been cleaning up for years from lots of contaminants. The fact that Indian Point had been dumping these contaminants into the river for years doesn't make it right to continue to do, even if it's just a little bit more, okay, a little bit more. So the fact that you didn't take it seriously, That's on you guys. That is on you. That's on Holtec, that you didn't take it seriously. You didn't believe that this was going to pass, and you didn't also look into other options because you thought this was the easiest path forward. So I just want to make it clear for the record that that's on you, and you've known again for years, and you said, Pat, you said yourself, more than a year that we've been hearing from it here in the Hudson, because you were also looking at it up in Massachusetts. So not to take that seriously, that just doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense to now use the workers as pawns and point at us as the bad guys, because we're trying to do the right thing for the environment, and we're trying to do the right thing for this region. You guys may not agree that it's the right thing because you're, again, in the nuclear industry, this is just what we do. This is how we deal with the water. We just dump it into another water body and hope that dissolution is the solution. But not everybody agrees that that really is the solution, and for years, nobody really knew that it was happening. So now that everybody's eyes are open and they see that this is something that was happening, and again, yes, we've heard all the different sides of this argument. It doesn't mean that there isn't a better path forward. And like Richard said, it doesn't mean that if you had been working on a different path forward, that we couldn't come up with a way to do it in a reduced timeline, or a timeline that matches what was originally planned, with people continuing to work through Christmas this year.
Okay, Dana, you know what? I hear what you're saying. This is your political thing going on here.
It's not my political
Yes,
thing.
it is, Dana.
Yes,
Because
right,
you
you're right, Teresa, because I represent the people.
not here. I represent my village. I'm concerned about my village. You did not represent my village, Dana. You did not contact me with this legislation. Hey, Teresa, how do you think this legislation will affect this village? So I'm gonna respond, because I'm not finished there. So what I want to respond to you is that in the joint proposal, okay, and also the original closure agreement, both of those agreements, this statement was in there. Radiological determination. The water quality certification holders are required to operate the Indian Point nuclear power plant consistent with the NRC requirements and limitations relating to radiological releases. Okay. This approval certifies that the WQC holders are currently in compliance with water quality standards relating to the radiological releases from Indian Point to the Hudson River. So here's where it gets interesting. Based on the facts and circumstances in the records, but that future radiological releases to the Hudson River, if any, that materially differ from those addressed in the record may be subject to separate action by the New York State Department, DEC, to the extent authorized by applicable law. So what he's saying, under the agreement, which now we see this agreement, this piece of paper, it is not worth the paper it's printed on. These agreements were signed. So they're assuming the agreement that they signed, and I'm not defending them. I read these agreements. Also, the PSDAR, the Post-Shutdown Decommissioning Activities Report, also addressed this. Everyone had the opportunity to discuss this. Everyone had the opportunity to comment on this before it was signed. So let me tell you who the signatures were on this that agreed to this. So they're saying they were surprised that it was passed because there were agreements that were made. So on the joint proposal, let's see. We have Anthony Vitale, who worked for Entergy, Pam Cowan, HOTEC, John Sipos. John Sipos is here in the room, Deputy General Counsel. Letitia James, Attorney General. Basil Sagos, DEC Commissioner. Peter Costello, New York Energy Research and Development. Enrique Catalano, Hendrick Hudson School District. Myself, Teresa Knickerbocker, Village of Buchanan. Supervisor Puglisi from the town of Cortland. Richard Berkeley, Public Utility Law Project. And our friends at Riverkeeper, Paul Gallay.
Right.
So these were the agreements that were made. There were discussions that were had. The PSDAR was discussed.
I think, Teresa, by the way, those words, I think they may mean different things to different people, speaking
Possibly.
putting on my legal hat here.
Okay.
I think these things may mean different things to different people. I don't think they mean the whole take was guaranteed no change in the law for the next 25 years.
Exactly. And it says applicable law.
Yeah,
Under applicable law.
I would
Under
also,
applicable law.
I would also just say one thing. You know, referring to what Assembly Member Levenberg had said, that the public was not aware that this had been a common practice of the industry going back 50 years. The public was just not aware of that. And so when the public heard about this, this was not just an outcry here, it was an outcry in Massachusetts, it was an outcry in the South Pacific with Fukushima, it was Japan and South Korea. There are 500,000 people who signed a petition in New York State about this. So, you know, this was not Pete and Dana and a couple tree huggers. This was, and I mean that seriously, this was something bigger
Absolutely.
than all of us, okay? None of us expected this to get this big, but we are where we are, all right? We are where we are, and the options are either you can sue, or we have the options that are allowable by the NRC. And I think that we should, as Tom Congdon mentioned, we should explore those viable options that are still approved by the NRC and look at those timelines so that we can move as rapidly as possible. We're sitting on, I don't know, what was it, $1.8 billion or $1.7 billion, the rough figures. So the money is there to do the work. The one thing that was also concerning is hearing there are buildings that can come down with all this money, and they're not a priority, but we could be keeping people employed working on those buildings that are not a priority. Let's make them a priority. Let's keep people working, and then we can continue to work on what the solutions are to deal with the water. That's just my point.
So just to add to that, so we do have a crew that is going to continue to strip out buildings during this time period. I can't take buildings down until I can strip it. So we are continuing with decommissioning. It's just not as fast as we would like. You know.
And I'll be honest, part of that is when you look to take down buildings, you look to take down 3, 4, 5 at a time. It's much more economical. Onesies, twosies don't make sense. So the original schedule, the way it was laid out, would allow for more kind of major demo at the same time, which would allow for, you know, us to be good stewards of the trust fund and ensure that the funds are being used to do what they need to be done.
Can you quantify that difference, please? If you do 1 building, 3 buildings, 6 buildings, what are the economies of scale?
What was the question?
Sorry, I couldn't understand that,
What are the
Richard.
economies of scale if you do 1 building,
Depends on-
3
depends on the
buildings,
buildings.
or 6 buildings?
But it's significant when you do mob and demob. You really don't want to bring in a crane for 1 small building, break it down, go away for 3 months. You want to schedule that so you have multiple buildings and you can use the equipment, mob it once, demob it once. So there's significant dollars.
So we are preparing for that.
Yeah.
Right, so we are keeping a crew and we are stripping out the buildings. And I talk about stripping out buildings, the generator alone the main generator is 250 tons, so these are big components. So we're going after the biggest components now on the non-rad side. The rad side I already discussed, that's vessel seg.
Okay.
Supervisor Becker has his hand up from Zoom. Supervisor Becker?
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. I'll be brief. I just want to bring up a couple of points. Concerning the new legislation that was passed in New York State, it's not just the local representatives, aside from the Village of Buchanan, the senator or the town board of Portland or the assemblywoman. The support for this legislation is also at the federal level. When we had our rally back in May, we had 5 United States Congress members write in support of stopping this discharge of nuclear water. So federal officials are on board. In addition, Senator Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, and our other Senator Gillibrand also wrote to the NRC asking them not to allow this to happen. So the support against the discharge of water is broad, and it's not just local or state, it's even now federal. So I want to make that point. Secondly, going back to the 4 original proposals of what could be done with the water, leaving it on site, the Village of Buchanan is opposed to that in any form. And, I believe in home rules, so even though I think personally it's viable, I will support the Village of Buchanan that maybe it should not be stored there if they don't want it. So I'm concerned that we're not looking at other options, and I certainly don't understand why we say it takes 8 years to develop a plan to get rid of this water when we don't even have an idea what any of the plans are going to be. And I still have not gotten an answer as to why it can't be shipped elsewhere. I proposed early that if you tank out into the ocean, it's got to go somewhere. It's certainly going to be more diluted in the ocean. Why tankers can't take it off-site and into the ocean remains a mystery to me. Or putting it in tankers and taking it off-site. I mean, we have to get rid of the water. That's point one. We know that. Number two is it's been decided that it can't, at least for now, and it would take years of going through various courts to get that water to be in the river, if that was possible through the courts. So, and if we don't allow it to stay on site to respect the Village of Buchanan, you need other alternatives. And I have not heard other alternatives. I still think it can be shipped somewhere else. And I'm asking Holtec to explore those possibilities and to report back to us. Thank you.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, Supervisor, and those are the options we're looking at, the additional options. So we can do that. I will just say to the shipping, when you talked about bringing it out to the ocean, that's against international treaty, which is the reason why that's something that's not a viable option.
Can I just say the last thing from me, which is...
Richard, I'm sorry. We still have to get to a public statement hearing.
Yeah, can I just have one last question, Tom, which is...
Yeah, one last question. I want to turn it back to Holtec to finish their slides. Go ahead.
Which is, let me just emphasize, I really want to work with you guys to figure out how to get this water dealt with. Before I became a lawyer, for my sins, I was a hydrologist and did a couple of things. So, I think we can figure, this is a soluble problem. We have the money, right? We even have 2 tanks on site that could take a lot of the water. So, it's a soluble problem, but let's work on it. Like, you guys have got great technology for dealing with, well, at least you claim to have great technology. It's certainly fast technology to deal with the spent fuel pool, which is great, right? I'm really happy that we got that spent fuel pool dealt with. And it seems to me that's a lot harder job than storing some water for 12 years. So, you've achieved the hard stuff. If we can work together and get the easy stuff done, that would be great. Now, my question is, where are the RWSTs on this photo?
So can you blow that up, Tom? Pretty tight, right in the middle. So move your down just a little bit. See that? No, we're a little to the left. Right there. Stop moving it. That's unit 1.
That's unit 1.
So right to the left of, that silver tank. There's 2 silver tanks. There you go. There you go. That's unit 2's.
Okay.
And if you kind of scroll the picture up a little bit, I need to see more of unit 3. Up.
Where's unit 3?
The other up. There you go. So there's the unit 3 dome. And if you go down the road right from the unit 3 dome, the first tank right there is the RWST. Okay?
Oh, I see.
Okay?
So, I just observed those are pretty small footprints, right? And that's 720,000 gallons of storage.
360,000 gallons per tank.
Right, exactly.
40 feet tall.
We agree.
There's always a last time for everything. All right. How about I get back? Tom, you good with me starting again?
Yeah, please finish the slides. If you could wrap up in 5 minutes, we'll get to the public statement.
I will be quick. Most of this stuff was discussed on John's slides. So all of the LARs have been approved. I know everybody hates the word LAR, but that's the NRC process. They picked a bad word for it. So the PDEP was approved. The exemption for on-site, off-site liability and property damage was approved, and that was based on the risk, right? So the property damage was based on an operating plant, 2 plants at 100% power, and since all the fuel is on the asphyxia pad, we no longer need that level of insurance. Cybersecurity requirements have been relaxed for inside the protected area, and the cyber requirements on the asphyxia pad it was designed not to have any critical digital assets. So the existing network protection is all in place. It's just cyber was critical digital assets. The Unit 2 tech spec change, this was administrative only. And we never enacted the PDEP. It came too late. and we never enacted the tech spec change. It came too late. It's all covered by the bottom three, which are the big three we were waiting for. They're all approved. As of about 28 hours ago, we got the last one. And we're implemented that today, and we'll finish implementing that tomorrow. So right now, the emergency plan is SFISI only. The tech spec for Unit 2 and Unit 3, all of the systems have been removed. It's been stripped down to what we require for the plant. The SFISI has its own tech spec, which is our bounding document, how we operate. And then the last thing is the security plan, and I kind of drew that out before. So the next slide, NRC third quarter inspection report. So that went from July 1st to September. It included reviews of design changes, mods, PINR, or problem identification and resolution, performance status, occupational rad dose, environmental monitoring, rad waste management, and transport. It also included the Unit 3 dry cast campaign. And they were, based on this results, there was no violations of more than safety significance. Those are words out of the NRC. That just means there was no violations. Yeah. It's another poor wording. The next inspection was October 2nd to the 5th. That was asphyxia and dry fuel. No violations, no new issues. 10/16 to the 19th. Rad waste greater than Class C, no violations, no issues. 11/27 to 11/30 last week, year-end closeout inspection. So the OSHA, our OSHA record is abysmal. None of us are happy with it. The NRC basically referred us to OSHA for an outside inspection, and we'll support OSHA, and we'll take whatever actions come out of that. So we do have a potential violation. This is a good example of the level of detail the NRC goes into. So the NRC came in June for their annual financial assurance inspection, and they left with a question. So we had several line items that said charitable contributions. So they questioned whether charitable contributions could be could be charged to the decommissioning trust fund or not. So in June, they took that back. Took them about 3 months to get through their legal review, and the NRC determined that charitable contributions are not an acceptable trust fund expense. So we're going to get a potential violation for that. So immediately, we stopped charitable contributions from the trust.
What were the charitable contributions?
Those are things like supporting...
Riverkeeper, right?
Yeah, supporting Hendrick Hudson.
Checks in the mail, right?
Yeah. No, some of Hendrick Hudson, we had a couple of asks over the year for fashion show, different things that they've asked for. The Blaze is always one that asks for a donation. I'm trying to think, I forget, there's Chamber of Commerce. There's
How much money are we talking about, roughly?
About $60,000 a year in charitable donations around Indian Point.
But there's no violation if Holtec makes those donations from its corporate entity.
Correct,
It just
correct.
can't be reimbursed out of the
Yeah,
trust.
and if there's found to be a violation, we would put that money, we will reimburse the trust for that
So
with
you can
interest.
still do the charitable work.
Yes.
Do it more charitably.
No.
Just can't come.
So, as an example of what you were asking for, some of these donations were $500 to the fashion show at Hendrick Hudson High School. We support it. We try to support the community as best we can. But she had a 20,000 line item Excel spreadsheet that she reviewed. So out of that, we talked about, $500 million was spent last year. That's what was identified. So we accept it. We'll learn from it, and it's a fleet issue. It's actually an industry issue.
Thank you.
Can I get on your Christmas list?
No more money for Riverkeeper, sorry. So we kind of talked about everything in the oil and discharge canal, so I'll talk about what we learned from it. So we've spent the last year and a half removing every above-ground oil storage tank on site, Unit 2 and Unit 3. Unit 1 was gone already. So we did that, and the 5-foot sump is basically our basement. That's where everything is drained for the past 50 years. There was legacy oil. We had an oil skimmer installed on the sump. The sumps were in automatic. What happened is a coincidence. We put aux steam in the day before this occurred, and the aux steam condensate return goes to that sump. It washed down steam cleaned some of the floor for us, went to the sump, overwhelmed the oil skimmer, and a little bit of oil went out there. Security identified it at 3 o'clock, 1500.
by 2130, Miller Environmental they had already installed the booms and they were leaving the plant. So we watched the oil. It was a sheen, blotches of oil, only in the discharge canal. Never made it to the outfall structure. Never made it past our first set of booms. We had a temporary boom installed within 2 hours. We watched the oil. Miller came in. They put 2 additional booms up. So what we did is we used a subset of Champion Environmental Services. We brought them in, and 2 days later, we turned all the sump still off, so that solved the problem. And we steam cleaned both 5-foot Unit 2 and Unit 3. So eliminate the potential in the future. There's no more oil in the building. Should not get any more oil on the bottom. So we fixed the problem. Unit 3 is done. Unit 2 will be next week, but the sumps are off. So we have a couple of more actions over the month. I'm not going to go through them. They're on here, and we'll follow up with that. But the DEC did visit. They did not have any concerns with what we did, and they agree it was very minor. Next slide. So, since the last meeting, we had an OSHA recordable. A Teamster slipped while he was climbing into his dump truck and wound up hurting his back. To us, that's a low probability, high frequency test. Getting in and out of your car, a Teamster getting in and out of his dump truck is high frequency slip. He had 3 points of contact and he still slipped. We took the learnings from that. Actually, Cliff helped us, found us some training that Teamsters do on that, and we put that out to the entire station. The last one, the first aid, a supplemental worker strained his back. He was trying to put a job box onto a toolbox, onto a forklift by himself. He strained his back. It was a pre-existing condition, but he took ice pack and an aspirin, and that turned into a first aid. Again, we take the learnings from that seriously. So the pyramid speaks for itself. Our dose for the year is all under our goal for each of the units. That is all I have.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
Can I ask Frank, right next to the switchyard, there was a generator?
Gas turbine? Gas turbine.
Oh, a gas turbine. Okay, so that's been decommissioned.
That's been removed. So we demoed the entire, both gas turbines, the fuel oil storage tank, and the trailers that were up there for support. And right now, the last building that's up there, Con Ed has a network protector in there, and I'm meeting with them Monday to determine the schedule to remove that. Then we'll be able to remove that blockhouse that's up there, and then that area will be, so that area will be cleaned up from equipment. Now we can go to the next step, which is to remediate it with the DEC. Then we can put the condos up.
Thank you. So at this point, I'd like to turn it to the public statement hearing portion of the meeting. We have a number of, I'm sorry.
I'd like to say something.
Okay, Mayor, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I know we're running,
Yep, we're starting to run behind, but
Yes,
if you want to
that's
say one
fine.
last thing, that's fine, and then we'll move to the public
It's going to take a few
statement.
minutes, but bear with me. So before I start, I want to make very clear, because there's been some confusion, the Village of Buchanan is the host community of the Indian Point property. 240 acres to be exact. It's solely within the Village of Buchanan. The goal has been, and we've heard this many times also in the joint proposal, the safe, prompt decommissioning of Indian Point and the restoration of the property. That goalpost has now been moved. So I want to talk to you for 1 minute about, let's start with the Save the Hudson legislation. Quotes from the governor. Number 1, protect the economic vitality of the region. And all I have to say about that, what about the Village of Buchanan? What about the Village of Buchanan? Now that these goalposts have been moved. Pat O'Brien is not here. He met with the village board yesterday. We received the bad news that they're not interested in releasing any of the property at all at this point. So that puts us in a little bit of a situation because we're not happy that the plant closed, but we accepted it and we were moving forward and we were trying to reinvent ourselves. So that, by releasing that property, allowing us to develop that, would allow us to replace our tax base. So now that's not happening. So.
Mayor, can you just get a little closer to the mic?
Sure.
Thank you.
So the effect on the village, as we all know, we've lost half of our revenue. We were the largest employer in the area. We lost our largest taxpayer and a good corporate neighbor. Also, we have the cessation fund, which we're using for the last couple of years. Fortunately, we had that, and that ends for us in the fiscal year 27-28. So, once again, we are being put into a position here, and I'm going to go forward with the next, and I know, Peter, you had said something about economic vitality of the region. The Village of Buchanan has just been left, so we need some help here, and we're going to have some conversations going forward. Another thing the governor had said, we are closely working with the local communities. I will give the governor credit. She did, before the legislation was signed, she did call me, her team did call me. We had a discussion about the legislation, what it would mean to the Village of Buchanan. She was the only elected official that contacted the Village of Buchanan and said, hey, look, there's this legislation here. What do you think about it? How will it affect you? And how can we help you? And I'm talking local, I'm talking state, and I'm talking federal. Guys, the Village of Buchanan does exist. We are here. We're a wonderful community, good people. That's what this fight has been since 2017, since the announcement. We did have support originally. Yeah, right at the beginning we had support. And I do thank Pete and Sandy. I was very proud that we had all worked on getting legislation passed to tax the spent fuel. That was first in the nation. And I got that idea from working with other communities, community in Zion, Illinois. They got decimated, and they've been trying to get the Stranded Act passed. So the Stranded Act is going after the government, which had, the DOE, had promised that all this stuff would be off the property. That was the original agreement. So it's still sitting there, and it will sit there for many more years. There's no place to put it. That's not the industry's fault. That's the government's fault. That's the Department of Energy made an agreement, and so it sits there. So I got that idea from there to make those casks as real property. And they're about $1 million each. So we have 127 casks on the property. So we thought about it like, holy cow, we got $127 million homes there. So fortunately, and I do thank you, Pete, and I thank Sandy, you worked closely with us. That got passed, and I know it was New Year's Eve, and Pete called me and said, hey, Teresa, I think he's going to sign it, 8 o'clock. See what kind of life I have, right? I'm sitting by the phone waiting for legislation to pass. So, so going forward, I would like our elected officials, our elected representatives, to work with the Village of Buchanan. There's the plant up in Oswego that's been subsidized to stay open. So there must be something, because of the change in this plan, the change in this agreement, the agreements that were made. You know what? We subsidize everything else. We subsidize the renewables. We subsidize everybody. There's got to be some money there for Buchanan. It's just not right, because we were going down a path. We were decommissioning, and we were accepting what was happening. So the other one I'd like to discuss is the restricting of discharges. That was in that legislation. So, okay, so let's not be hypocritical here. We have other discharges that go into the river. We have industrial, we have medical, we have people who have medical exams. So we're talking, everyone's talking zero discharge. What about these other things? I mean, I'm sorry Courtney isn't here tonight. I know Courtney Williams had mentioned at one point that she works for Regeneron, and she does work with Tritium. So I don't know, when these industrial, where does this go? Where does the medical waste go? Where does the waste go when people have medical exams? I know where it goes when they have medical exams. It ends up in the sewer treatment plant and into the Hudson River. So we're not talking zero now. So if we're going to do zero, all the other industries, everybody else needs to be on board. I'm sorry, I had a lot to talk about. I'm a little angry, in case you haven't noticed. Once again, the VOB wants a safe, timely, prompt decommissioning and restoration of property. That hasn't changed. That has been the goal. Everyone, as I said before, had the opportunity to comment all through here. And yes, I've heard that not everybody knew that, but the activists and other people that have been involved, and you know, I know Marilyn Ellie, my gosh, right since the 90s, Marilyn, we used to go to the NRC meetings, and so, you know, I'm not saying that, Marilyn, I'm not telling that you knew about the discharge or anything, but I'm just saying I've known.
Because I did not.
Yeah, no, but I'm knowing.
Excuse me, wait.
I'm sorry.
I have to say that I did know about the discharge. I, for the last 20 years, have been saying that the plant, that nuclear plant, discharged to the air and to the water, and nobody really took that seriously.
So, but this is, we've had these conversations, the NRC, for many years. I've been involved since the 90s. I guess I'm old now. I'm not an expert. I will tell you I'm not an expert. I'm not trained in nuclear. I haven't had the education in nuclear, and I'm not have the experience. I don't have it. I have been to every meeting since the announcement in 2017. I have not missed one. First, it was the Community Unity, then it was the Citizens Advisory Panel, then now the DOB. I'm happy to be on the DOB because, you know, we're the host community. Somebody needs to represent the village. I have traveled to Vermont. I have spoken to other people, other communities throughout the country, talking about the spent fuel, talking about the Stranded Act, talking about their experiences. I am pretty knowledgeable at this point, but I'm not an expert, I'll tell you that. I had to train myself on all this so that I could protect my community. You know what, when you become a mayor or an elected official, there's no course that says, so when your largest employer closes, what do you do? There's no training on that. It's training on the job. We talked about the Stranded Act. I've sat here and I've listened to the experts. And when I say the experts, who we have is the NRC, the EPA, the DEC. This is what we have, whether you like them or not. These are our experts. I've sat in these meetings. I've listened to the DEC. I've listened to what the NRC has said about decommissioning. The EPA, we had slides up there that showed what the discharge is. I have to go by facts. And you know what? I can't listen to people that, I understand everybody's passionate about this. I get that, but I have to listen to experts. And so I know my opinion is very different from everyone else, but I'm doing what I think is for the best for the village. I also have said before that I do realize the decommissioning not only affects the village of Buchanan, where my heart and soul is, but I understand that it affects other people, the decommissioning process. But this slowing down or this pause does not benefit anyone. It does not benefit anyone at all. The Save the Hudson, save the people of the host community. Pausing for 8 or more years does not benefit anyone. So thank you for your time, and I would like to say to the activists, we definitely probably disagree on this, but I don't want what I said distorted. I do care about the Hudson River. I'm a 4th generation in the village of Buchanan. I learned to swim in the Hudson River. I boat on the Hudson River. I love the Hudson River. We want it to stay healthy, yes. I worry about the air. That's why I'm concerned about having storage tanks there. So there has to be some type of a solution. Listening to the experts, the best solution seemed to be the discharge. Okay, that's listening to the expert. If someone can come to me and tell me there's a better way, I'm all ears. If someone can come to me and tell me, hey, we're willing to support the Village of Buchanan, we want to work with you, we realize you're going through a tough time, my door is always open and I'm all ears. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mayor. Assemblywoman Levenberg and then Senator Harkam both asked for another couple minutes, and then we'll get to the public statement hearing.
I mean, I just want to say, of course, we support all of the people in New York, and certainly I support all the people in the 95th Assembly District. I absolutely want to work with Buchanan on figuring out a solution for your particular financial situation over the next few years. As we heard today, the 8 years was hypothetical based on guesses of what might come next. It wasn't based on how long or what a next or other option might be. We know that there are other options, and again, Mayor, while you highlighted the one that you liked best, obviously there were many voices that did not feel that that was the best moving forward, even those who listen to the experts. So I think that, again, I'm very committed to moving forward and finding solutions. I do think that we should work collaboratively with Holtec as we move forward to make sure that we can find ways to keep people employed who should be employed, because there is, as was said multiple times and certainly publicly, that there's plenty of work and that this wasn't part of the critical path to decommissioning. So again, continue to be committed to making sure that we keep jobs wherever we can or find alternative jobs. Again, we were also told that the employers that Holtec uses to employ all of those folks, carpenters included, had other work on other sites. So even if it wasn't at Holtec, that there was a lot of work still to be done elsewhere. So again, would love to make sure that we can keep as many people here, especially those with expertise, as we continue to work on the decommissioning of this plant. And yes, I am committed to making sure that it gets done safely for all New Yorkers and expeditiously. And I hope, Mayor, that you would be willing to consider creative solutions that may not necessarily be the ones that seem most popular at first glance, but could actually be most successful. Thanks.
Yes, Dana, yes, I am open to other solutions. I have sat on this DOB board, I've sat on many, many meetings, and on the DOB board, there were options that were brought up, and we found that they were at that time not viable. So I'm kind of hoping maybe in the future there's some type of new technology. But the problem is, now we're on an 8-year delay, maybe 10 years, I don't know. So this, it doesn't help anybody, this delay. I am open to other options. If it's viable, I'm open. I don't have my heels dug in the ground. I just want to see the safe, all of us, that was the goal, the safe decommissioning, but the prompt part has kind of thrown out the door now. So that's all I'm saying with that.
Senator?
Thank you very much. I just want to thank you, Mayor, for your comments and your candor. I think it's safe to say there has been no more passionate advocate for the people of Buchanan than you, and we certainly appreciate it. And we, in the Senate and the state, are committed to continuing the financial support of Buchanan. You remember it was a fight to fully fund the cessation fund and to extend that. We got that. Great partnership on the fuel rods. There is a community benefits fund, which the village was one of the beneficiaries of. We've gotten millions of dollars in extra foundation aid for the Hen Hood School District to support the students, but also take the burden off taxpayers. I personally got an extra $1 million for Hen Hood from a Senate fund that we have for just this purpose. And if we have to do other things, we are prepared to do it. We work for you, and if there are things that we can do to financially support the Village of Buchanan, we're committed to doing that.
Thank you, Senator.
Much appreciated, and the conversation to continue.
Yep.
Absolutely. Now, just before we get to the public statement here, I do want to also acknowledge Catherine Borgia, who is term limited, and so this will be her last meeting with us at the DOB, and I thank you for your service.
At this side of the table, but
Right.
signed up for public comment.
Right. Right, we expect to see a lot more of you at future meetings.
Yes, thank you, thank you. You know, this is a difficult process, and I think all of us have been trying to work together to mitigate the efforts, but I do think that I appreciate everyone's concern and point of view, but I do think that there are solutions that maybe take a little bit bigger broader perspective from many of the stakeholders at this table. I know, speaking for the county, and Susan Spear, of course, is here representing Westchester County as well, that, you know, we don't have a lot of authority in this situation, but we do certainly have advocacy, and we are certainly good partners, and we want to continue to be good partners. So, you know, sometimes these meetings take a turn that is a little bit divisive, but I think that is actually healthy and important, because all of the concerns that are being expressed are valid, and we understand that you're a business and you want to decommission. We understand that, and we understand that there's a financial incentive for you to do it as quickly as possible, but you also have to take into account the needs of the people who surround. So we appreciate that. So that's all I'll say. I have some other questions that I'll ask, but you know what, I'm going to email them.
Thank you, and look forward to working with you in your future capacities. Tom Kaczmarek, would you please walk us through reading through the list of pre-registered speakers, and we'll take them in the order they registered, please.
Absolutely. Attendees will be called on in the order in which they registered, starting with those participants who are here in person. Those who did not pre-register to speak this evening will be able to direct you to additional opportunities on subsequent slides. So to provide a fair opportunity to speak, there will be a strict 3-minute time limit. Speakers will be cut off if they exceed this time limit, so please listen for cues as to how much time you have remaining. With that, our first speaker is Susan Van Dulsen, followed by Jacqueline Drexler and Tina Voltzbonger.
Thank you. This was quite a meeting, and I'm glad I was here. I had written some comments, and I think a lot of things were already addressed, but basically it sounds to me like there's a lot of effort to work towards some sort of solution, and we're getting there. I don't hear this from Holtec at all, and I'm very disappointed. Because how do you not think ahead that maybe the law would pass? Like, that's arrogant. And there was a letter circulated to all of you about an incident in 2021. Senator Markey in Massachusetts wrote a lot of questions, and you're arrogant. The company's arrogance, to me, is astounding. How do we trust you? You tell us it's going to take 8 extra years, and you can't explain that. You may be suing, and you're being cagey. And then workers' lives are at stake, and you're not really being creative. So basically, everybody else, I think, is pretty much getting to the point of understanding that there are experts. You say you know how to build a great cask, just like Jim said. Why do you rule out the idea of there potentially being a good way to store this water in a potentially building that exists? Maybe. I don't know, I understand what Teresa's saying, but let's think creatively, okay? And I'm not hearing, I'm just really, this is not what I was planning to say, but that's what I feel after 3 hours. This is so disappointing. You've discharged water in Massachusetts, and it violated a NIPDES permit back in 2021. There was an article in the paper today in Massachusetts about that. I just feel so disappointed. I'm a grandmother in Westchester. I've lived here my whole life. I have 2 grandchildren who live here. And I want to know that you will work with these people. All of these people are here to help solve this problem, including all of these people. Why are we here? So you can be arrogant and tell us you didn't expect the law to pass, so you didn't care enough to think about what might be an option. So next month, thankfully, or next meeting, rather, in February, we're going to meet Arnie Gunderson. I appreciate that you are going to have him here. Thank you, Senator Harcum, and thank you, Assemblymember Levenberg, for helping with that.
And I really want to know that this is going to be solved in a way that will help everybody, not in an arrogant way that you didn't think it was going to pass. That's just disrespectful to this entire operation here.
15
so
seconds.
Please, thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Drexler?
Okay, I'm Jackie Drexler from Valley Cottage in Rockland County. I echo everything that Susan said. I do believe that there are enough bright and brilliant minds in this room and other people that can be accessed to come up with a solution that works for the company and works for the river and works for the people of the town. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm just going to go into something else here. Surprise, surprise, the NRC could not be here. Considering that the DOB must have known this in advance, and instead of wasting our time with NRC nonsense and approvals for Holtec, and knowing that the community at large has been advocating for the Ani Gunderson short video to be shown with Mr. Gunderson available, by Zoom, we feel kind of ignored. I'm glad that Mr. Congdon has made the suggestion that this video is posted and that it should be reviewed by people. I think it's very illuminating, and it may help everyone to kind of calm down and realize that there really could be a solution here. So one of the other reasons that I wanted to speak tonight is because I wanted to talk about another thing that we've been advocating for, something that has been missing, and it went missing a long time ago. When the DOB was originally created, there was planning for, let's call it, an advisory panel that was supposed to include citizen participation, experts' participation, and funding for experts. We know that the DEC has, as part of its mandate, a citizens' participation plan, and that is something different. We know that the DOB has David Lochbaum as its expert. However, and not to slight Mr. Lochbaum's expertise in engineering, he's not a medical, radiological, safety and emergency planning, gas pipeline, or seismic earthquake specialist. I'm stating that I and others will be working to create a citizens' participation and experts advisory group similar to what is in Vermont with the Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel, and similar to the original intent for Indian Point decommissioning. There was original legislation that was changed, moved over to the jurisdiction of the DPS without any funding attached. And this should not only apply to Indian Point, but 2 and 4 all nuclear reactor communities across New York State that will be confronting the archaic process of decommissioning. The decommissioning of Indian Point should allow for this, what has been missing for all of these years. And I would just also like to speak very briefly to, I think it was
15
Dr.
seconds.
Becker, who made a statement that, wanted to dump it in the ocean, and it was said that it was against international treaty. I would just like to say that back in the 1950s, research that Lamont Geological Doherty Observatory did, requested by the Atomic Energy Commission, proved to the Atomic Energy Commission that there was huge activity in the oceans and that they would not dump. I would like to end by saying I thank Governor Hochul once again for passing the Save the Hudson bill. No more radioactive pollution, not in our water and not in our air, and that we hope that the governor will somehow support the concept of safe on-site storage. Thank you very much.
Ms. Boltz-Bongar, followed by Pamela Hudson and Nancy Van.
You're not going to believe this. I'm just going to come up here and say how grateful I am and what a good meeting this was. And really, for my representatives, Senator Harcum, Assembly Member. And I want to thank Governor Hochul for understanding what the people of the state of New York want, and that is a healthy and thriving Hudson and community, and that our health and safety comes first and foremost no matter what. Since the NRC is coming, I just have a couple of requests. I'm curious if they could respond to the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals decision that was made in August about the NRC. Actually, the NRC was preempted, Mr. Sipos, so I was very pleased about that, as you can well imagine. So we'd just like to hear about that. if they're going to be addressing licenses and amendments. I'm very, very disappointed about the emergency funding. As you know, I presented here, and I showed you very clearly how we do not, along with James Witt, you know, in 2004, I believe. Anyway, no, I think it was 3. He came out with Anyway, I would like to know how much the emergency planning fund was, how much was spent, and how much in December Holtec gets to withdraw from that decommissioning trust fund. Those are the kinds of critical questions, just like the district court, you know, of appeals decision, that it would be great to be addressed here, if that could happen. So I believe in the skills and smartness of Mr. DiNapoli. And so I'm really hoping that he may be able to take a look at this and make an explanation of what's going on. Also, I'm just wondering if the Attorney General's office is going to attend next DOB, because it would be great to hear about the permitting process, like what, you know, in terms of, you know, what kind of jurisdiction, you know, home rule of the town of Buchanan has versus NRC and everything else. And Arnie Gunderson does address this, did address this in his video and his webinar. So I look forward to hopefully that being addressed. That's all, and I hope somebody else gets to speak.
Thank you.
Tina, I just want to say the NRC would supersede the local community.
Next is Pamela Hudson. Ms. Hudson, are you with us? Followed by Nancy Van.
I just want to say that listening to Holtec today has not at all improved my impression of the company. It seems like they are doing everything they can to make this decommissioning more difficult, more time-consuming, and only are interested in those aspects that will actually profit the company. I mean, one of the things that they mentioned was that they were making donations from the Decommissioning Trust Fund. You don't get to make donations with other people's money. If you want to make a donation and promote goodwill so everybody loves Holtec, do it with your own money. Another thing that they've talked about was that they're not taking down buildings on the property that could be coming down because it's not their priority. So you get to decide the priority of who gets to have jobs, who gets to move along with getting the decommissioning finished, and you decide that the things that you can do, you aren't going to do because that doesn't get you through any of the regulatory hoops that you want to get through. How about thinking about the community that you're working in? How about thinking about the people who live here? Another thing, on page 7, you were talking about the phytoremediation plan. That you can't use that particular way of addressing the tritium because you can't grow hemp. Could I remind you that there are a lot of other fast-growing plants? I mean, bamboo comes to mind, phragmites that grow in our wetlands come to mind. You decided to choose a plant to grow that you can't grow so that this particular way of remediating the tritium is not available. Another thing that came up tonight is that there's a section of the Indian Point property that isn't in Buchanan. So whether Buchanan wants to put in
15 seconds.
put in tanks, is not dispositive of whether this is an adequate solution. There is another option that you haven't even told us about. You haven't mentioned that you've been investigating whether better tanks are available, whether you yourselves, with all of your storage
Ms. Van?
expertise.
I'm sorry, please wrap up.
Oh, okay, thank you. So, thank you to everyone for their participation, and I have several other points about Holtec, and I guess I will write them to you.
We'd welcome the written comments as well. And just as a point of order, I think that the issue is not the type of plant, but the vegetation as a method of any vegetation.
And that was the company that approached us at the last meeting, so that's,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
what we looked at.
So it wasn't just the type of plant, it was the process of, but,
So,
and, right.
so next we have Susan Shapiro, followed by Jen Benson and Deborah Porter.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. First of all, your predecessor from Holtec, Mr. Baroni, provided me with an effluent report from spent fuel pool 2 and 3, and we're having our experts review that. One of the questions they have is, where were those measurements taken from? So if you can provide me with that answer, I'd appreciate that. Respectfully, with regard to the issue of the water staying on site and this, plan that, this belief that this site is going to be quickly decommissioned and that we're going to clean it up quickly, the water doesn't really make the difference. The issue is the spent fuel is going to stay here. There's no place for it to go. So it's a red herring, this idea that, honestly, I agree that we all want to work together, but let's be honest about it for a change. Instead of what Holtec promoted, that they're going to clean it up fast and make condos, which is nonsense. So I just want to state that. Let's all have that let's be realistic. And I agree with you that spent fuel pools, the spent fuel tanks is a new use of the land, and there should be taxed. Should have been taxed. Minnesota's been doing it. Other states are doing it. We should be doing it here. And I agree, it should go back to the community. With regard to the monitoring, I'm very confused. You say there are 16 monitors and Holtec's agreeing to keep 3 of them? I don't understand why you're taking down any of the monitors. You're taking down buildings, you're taking down structures that were radioactive. There's blasting, there's dust, there's stuff that's going on. We need all the monitors, we need more monitors. We don't need less monitors. I don't understand. If you can clear that up, I'd really appreciate that. And also, what are you monitoring for? Operation monitoring is different than decommissioning monitoring. We have different kinds of materials in the decommissioning. We need monitoring for decommissioning, not the same monitoring that we had for operations for the air and the water. I've heard a rumor, and I hope it's not true, that there's a rumor that you have said that you're heating the buildings to 90 degrees. Is this true or not? If you can answer after I'm done. Because
answer right now, no.
Okay, good. Because there's that would mean that you're trying to evaporate. So I'm glad you're not, and I hope you don't. With regard to New York State's jurisdiction, the DEC's jurisdiction, the DEC has always had jurisdiction, and the DOH, on the plume under the plant to clean this up. In New York State, all water has to be potable water, groundwater. And clearly that's not the case. That's why it's a red herring to say this plant's going to be cleaned up at any time soon. We're talking about 60 years, honestly. Let's all be honest. Let's talk about the real honest amount. It's
15
bedrock,
seconds.
like you've said. Okay? So it's going to take time. So I have 3 asks for Holtec.
Please be quick, you
I
only
will.
have 10 seconds.
Will Holtec agree to do comprehensive continuous monitoring and publicly report releases of radioactive effluent from the air outlets of the overpacked modules holding multi-purpose canisters? 2, can Holtec provide reports or studies that it has conducted or sponsored upon which it relies with regard to options for holding radioactive wastewater at the decommissioning or decommissioned nuclear sites for an extended period, more than 10 years? And 3, will Holtec agree to inspect 1/5 of the spent fuel canisters and overpacks at Indian Point every 5 years, to ensure that all canisters every year, so that every 5 years, we will know that all canisters have actually been inspected. If inspection is not possible, we ask Holtec to maintain a wet hot cell transfer pool in the event of emergency.
Ms. Shapiro?
And also, or to change the canisters to be ones that can be inspected. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Benson, followed by Deborah Porter and Ed Cook.
Hello, my name is Jen Benson, and I am the Environmental Action Director at the Hudson River Sloop Clearwater, taking the reins after Amanda's legacy. I'm sure you're used to someone shorter, but I'm still trying to fill her shoes to the best of my ability. I wanted to thank Senator Harcum, current Assembly Member Levenberg, and previous Assembly Member Sandy Galiff for requesting that the trust fund balances be shared at the Decommissioning Oversight Board meetings as
Ms.
they
Benson?
are shared with state agencies. Am
Ms.
I not
Benson, you
close
just,
enough?
left the mic, thanks.
Wow, normally people tell me to quiet down, so that's an interesting turn of events. So I just wanted to reiterate my thanks and appreciation for the call to have the trust fund balances be presented at the Decommissioning Oversight Board meetings, as they are shared with New York State agencies twice a year. I also just want to emphasize that there was a lot of confusion around numbers and amounts of money and dates. And a really simple way to avoid that is just by putting them on a PowerPoint slide. So that would be great. Thank you for making that call. I also wanted to echo the request for presentations on expenditures and transactions as well. And thank you to Dana Levenberg and Richard for asking questions around how much wastewater is where and potential available storage capacity. I think that that conversation was way more muddied than it needed to be. I think that the questions that Richard was asking were straightforward and being misconstrued. So I'd really appreciate some clarity on where wastewater is now, where there might be space, and then opportunities for on-site storage, and to tackle Dana as well on that. I also was curious if within the oil discharge response, if a 6-hour response time is normal. And I also was curious if the new exemptions in response and requirements for emergency response would at all alter the timeline to potentially be longer in future moving forward, just thinking about both the Hudson as well as the community at hand. And then lastly, I know that the draft annual report was published on September 22nd, and I know that it was noticed through all required channels. However, we did meet on the 21st. And so we do have people who may not be reading emails in the same way that I have the luxury of reading emails for my job. And so I think that just in a good faith effort to really communicate openly with the public, it would have been helpful for there to be a flag that draft annual report was going to be released the following day.
15 seconds.
So just please keep that in mind in the future. I think that we all come to these meetings in good faith. I know we all have our heated moments and our moments of frustration, but I want to express my appreciation and hope for just a flag for that on behalf of the communities, nonprofits, and other people that sit in the audience to have that in the future. Thank you.
Totally fair point, and that was a simple oversight. Thank you.
Deborah Porter?
Hello, my name is Deborah Porter. I've lived in Westchester County for almost 30 years, and I live approximately 30 miles from Indian Point. I'm a mom, a grandma, and I've lived in the New York area for 60 years, the tri-state area, always in New York. We have a power plant. It's got 2 faults running under it, 3 gas lines running under it. There are about 25 million people living nearby, right? And all of a sudden, we have the NRC making a decision that Holtec doesn't have to be responsible for off-site emergency preparedness. What could go wrong? Please. I saw that picture, all those casks. That looks like a bullseye for a terrorist attack to me. And is there not one government agency, we've got the AG's office, the EPA, the state, the county, that won't go to court and challenge the NRC's decision? And they lifted their insurance requirements. If there's an accident, that means my home is not going to recover anything. My property values will be destroyed. Everybody in this room has a house in the area. You're not going to have property liability insurance for damages? Now, I don't know why the Nuclear Regulatory Commission doesn't care about us, but I feel like there must be some government official or agency willing to sue them and challenge that decision in court. That's all I have to say. Please protect us. Don't just let the NRC walk all over us.
Thank you.
Ed Cook? And then we'll move to we have one speaker on Zoom.
Thank you. I'm Ed Cook. I am a council representative of the North Atlantic States Regional Council of Carpenters. I'm also vice president of the Westchester Putnam Building Trades, and I'm a resident of New York State. We represent about 11,000 members statewide through the Carpenters Union and about 30,000 tradesmen and women in Westchester and Putnam County. No self-respecting labor leader would like any layoffs during any holiday time period. The reality is a nuclear power plant is put by a river or a body of water for cooling. That's the plant. That's how they were designed 50 years ago, 60 years ago. That's the reality. We inherited this. I'm here to talk about the recent layoffs on the heels of Senate Bill 6893 and Assembly Bill 7208, which was swiftly pushed through the legislature over a 2-week period at the end of session in June and hastily signed by the governor's office. The purpose of the bill was to prohibit discharge of any other radiological substance into the Hudson River in connection with the decommissioning of the nuclear power plant. It's an easy position to take and sounds great to the public who has not followed the science and was basically unaware of the safe, controlled, regulated, and monitored release of treated water that has taken place over 50 years without incident. It's amazing to me that the same legislators who publicly supported Holtec as a proper mechanism to do the decommissioning now turn their backs on them and switched and bait the game halfway through it. I'm disgusted. Actually, I had more to say, but I'm disgusted by telling somebody that I'm a pawn in the labor, the men and women that work at this plant for the last 50 years to keep this population safe are being used as pawn. We understand how nuclear power plants work because we've been in them our entire career. There's an ebb and a flow. If there's work there, we work there. If there's not work there, we don't work there. Holtec and Champion are not using the men and women of labor as pawns. This is a cause and effect. New York State Assembly, New York State legislator pushed through a popular bill. It's a populist thing. I agree with the woman that said zero should be zero. You shouldn't put medical waste in it. You shouldn't put lead in it. Yeah, we inherited something, and the most efficient way to get rid of the water would be to release it into the Hudson River in safe and measurable doses. In fact, Fukushima just started reintroducing water into the Pacific Ocean. And it's insane. We have a community that is being decimated because of the loss of a power generation plant. We have lack of power on the grid. The grid is stressed.
15
Our
seconds.
energy costs are higher than they've ever been in New York State. Our taxes are higher than they've ever been in New York State. And to answer your question, Senator Harckham, the jobs in White Plains are being done by an undocumented populace with labor brokers that are robbing from these men and women that are trying to make a better life for themselves, while the corporate welfare system of the state
Mr.
of New
Cook.
York and the IDAs that represent them are giving them grants and tax relief that hurts every single one of us in this room. So to say I'm a pawn and to say the men and women that work at Indian Point are pawns, shame on you, and it's disgraceful.
Our final speaker this evening is Michelle Lee. Michelle, you're unmuted. You may speak.
Yes. I think I'm going to, as it's so late, just emphasis, I guess, add to the point that Susan Shapiro was making. A lot of the context for the debate that went on today is really based on a fallacy and a lack of understanding of the history and of the realities of what decommissioning entails. Just today, World Nuclear Status Report 2023 was released. So that's a 549-page document that's done by world experts from many different countries who used a lot of the data. In total, there have only been 11 units, nuclear power plants, globally, that have been released from regulatory control. 11. Decommissioning is going to take a long time if it's done safely. The argument that, oh, we have to fire workers because we can't dump radioactive water into a vital waterway is absolute nonsense. And I frankly am incensed that Holtec is trying to, yes, use the workers as a way of trying to intimidate the elected officials of the state. It's a very, very common ploy of corporations when they have financial issues to basically blame regulation rather than blaming their own organizational structure or the way that they're handling the work they're doing. And frankly, I would hope that the public officials in New York really hold Holtec to task on this. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public statement portion of the meeting. Just a reminder, the slide in front of you offers other opportunities to comment. This meeting presentation is available on our website.
Thank you, Tom. Our next meeting is February 29th. Thank you all very much.